Daniel Defense advocates for individuals' rights to bear arms, which is why they manufacture 100% American-made high-quality firearms backed with a lifetime warranty. To learn more, visit DanielDefense.com. Hello, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, host of the Bulletproof Workshop podcast powered by AR15.com. Welcome to podcast 001. Ever striving for peak performance, I'm constantly in search of ways to improve or be better. Today's guest had an important role in that journey, and I'm excited to discuss his lessons learned over the years that led to his success and mine. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, but it's my pleasure. I'm super pumped to have you on here. I mean, I think you've had me as a guest for like 2 or 3 podcasts.
You've been on our podcast a few different times.
So this is my way of giving back in a sense. But
cool.
I also... we've had a long history together, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, no, it seems much shorter than it really is. And then as I was kind of replaying it in my head a little bit, I'm like, holy shit, this has been a long time.
It has. All right, for folks who don't know, the gentleman sitting across from me is John Wellbourn. John is a very large human. The reason for that is he was a pro football player. Then he got started in CrossFit and kind of pushed on and created Power Athlete, which I can't wait to talk about. So
cool.
John, let's start from the beginning. Where'd you grow up? How did that impact your life? And in particular, your choices early on.
I grew up in Southern California. I was the youngest of 3 boys.
Yeah. What was the time period, though?
I grew up in 80s.
Yes.
Okay. So I was born in the 70s, 76. Obviously, my mom and dad married and, youngest of 3 boys. And we played sports. We did a ton of stuff. I think for me, especially like the road to going and playing pro football started probably when I was about 6 years old.
Really?
Yeah. So my older brother, who's 6 and a half, 6 years older than me, he got beat up by like a local bully down the street. And my dad wasn't much of a fighter. And so, like everybody in the 80s, if you didn't know how to box or fight, you took your kid down to the dojo.
Yeah.
So my dad took my brother down to this Japanese Shotokan dojo. It was like the closest one. And there was like an old Japanese dude that taught it. The sensei. And after about 3 weeks, my brother came home and was like beating up on us. My dad just took my other brother and I and dropped us off. So my other brother just, I guess, picked up enough skills to defend himself, whereas my other brother and I just went every single day.
Nice.
So we would go, and like what was cool was they had late classes and it was pretty close. So after school, we would go and do whatever sport we were doing. And then after that, my mom would just take us over and drop us off at that place.
Dude.
And so we started doing that. And it was a real traditional Japanese Shotokan, like wooden floor. Like there were no mats. The instructor and I was recounting some of the imagery from when I was a kid. And I remember like the instructor's gi was like so starched that like whoosh, whoosh, like the sound of
it
like
made sound effects.
Yeah. And like his feet on the hardwood, like he was so technical in how he moved that was really like my first experience with like mastery of movement. And seeing people move where it's just fluid and effortless. And this really started what I talk about, like my Neo experience, where it was like a splinter in my mind in terms of developing and fostering athleticism. And that his ability to move. And like I've seen it happen in numerous times.
Yeah.
Like that moment. The other time I've seen it more recently was when I was at Mid-South. We work as a contractor, or I work as a contractor for Naval Special Warfare and have done for over a decade.
Yeah.
And I got
we'll get to that too. I can't wait.
I got a chance to go work with one of the teams at Mid-South and got to go to the shooting school. And as the instructors got out, their ability to seamlessly and effortlessly transition their weapons and move and like everything that they did was so effortless that it was incredible to see, but also like a pleasure to be around to see people do things that well. And their but it really goes back to like the idea of Bushido and Mushiyashi's Book of 5 Rings, the dedication to something and the perfection of a craft. And at that moment when I was 6, and I still remember it, it was like you had to kneel on the like on the hardwood And then what was wild was like shin hops, which people think like we use for like plyometrics and power athlete.
Yeah.
That was just how you got to your feet.
Yeah.
You know?
I can remember that.
So the other thing too is, we did a ton of isometric holds, and there was a lot of like forced positions. So the instructor would go around with like his Boken deal, and would like constantly crack us with this thing.
Nice.
So it was. I remember I was like maybe 6 or 7. I came home and told my mom, like, this dude hits us with a sword, and my mom's like, yeah.
That's like, why you're there.
Yeah, that's like, this is martial arts, right? Like we've seen the TV shows.
Oh my God.
So that really started in about age 10. I thought kicking was stupid. And I became like a real big boxing fan.
Yeah.
So I wanted to box. The problem was there wasn't a boxing place that was within driving distance or bike riding distance of where I grew up.
Yeah.
So the closest place was within bike riding was a kickboxing academy. So they had a ring. And they actually offered boxing classes.
Yeah.
So
I know a lot
it
of
was
places that do that.
It was a John Barrett Kickboxing Academy. I don't know if you remember him.
I kind of vaguely
He was
do.
like maybe he was in some movies or something.
Yeah.
It was kind of like he had a string of dojos. So I would go down there and box, and then I got real proficient with my hands.
Yeah.
And then I went to go play football when I was 14, and I had never played football before. So I'd always played basketball, played baseball.
Yeah. What led you to the football then?
My older brothers played,
that
and
makes
they
sense,
told me all the cool guys played football in high school, and I didn't want to be uncool.
Yeah.
So I went out there, and I remember like the first day we like line up, or like we get all of our pads, and I got no idea how to put any of this shit on.
Yeah.
So you're just like kind of looking around. I'm like, all right, so I got to put my pads in here. So I go out the first day, and I don't really I wasn't necessarily a fan of football growing up. My dad watched it, and and I remember when I was probably maybe 8th grade, one of the kids in my class, he was actually on my basketball team, and his dad was my basketball coach. A kid named Chris Shell, his dad was Art Shell, who's in the Hall of Fame. He was the Raiders head football coach.
I was going to say, that name sounded familiar. No
so
shit.
Played for the Raiders Hall of Fame. He was my Pee Wee basketball coach.
No shit.
So we all got invited to go to a Raiders game where his dad was the head coach. So we got like sit in the box and go meet the players. And so that was the first NFL game I ever went to.
That's pretty fucking
cool.
And
it was super neat. Like it was like.
How old were you again when that happened?
I was 8th grade.
Wow.
So then it was kind of like I saw those guys, and they were all like, dude, they were, and it's kind of even interesting even more, but in California, there's this deal called junior lifeguards. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Okay. So junior lifeguards starts about 9 or 10 years old, and it's kind of like an apprentice to be a lifeguard.
Yep.
So you have to test
open water lifeguards.
Yeah. So like you test in the pool, swim, and then you show up.
Yeah.
And there's like a C, 2 years of C's, 2 years of B's, and then 2 years of A's, and then when you finish A's, you go on and you become a lifeguard.
Right.
And so it was the best thing ever, because we would go to like whatever, summer school, whatever we did. And then in the afternoon, you drop off and you just basically go to the beach and you run, you swim, you paddleboard, you surf. It's like the single best thing you could ever go to in your life.
That does sound pretty fucking badass.
It is fucking the best. And so I remember I was probably, I must have been like 9 or 10. And we were, now mind you, this is like the mid 80s.
Yeah.
We were at a lifeguard station, and we were working on CPR on like a big dummy. And they would teach you like first aid, CPR, like if like tourniquets. I mean, they taught you all those skills.
Wow.
And I mean, now I think about how bitching that was and super valuable it is.
Right.
Because you open water swim.
Dude.
You learn to surf. Like it's just, it's by far the coolest thing about Southern California, growing up there. So we were there at this aid station, and it was pretty close to where like the Strand was, like the concrete pad.
Oh yeah,
like where people ride their bikes and walk. Mm-hmm. And we saw like this, like kind of like heard like a ruckus. It sounded like a big fight or something was going on.
Huh.
So we looked over and we saw these people like just making noises, and people. It was like seriously like a commotion. And we all kind of like walked up, and we started walking over, thinking that maybe somebody had passed out, somebody who needed help.
Right.
And then we realized that it was a man walking, and people were just like parting like the Red Sea and kind of like gasping. And we were like, what the fuck? And all of a sudden the dude walks by us, and he's wearing like a string tank top. He's wearing shorts, and he's got like running shoes on and like socks pulled up. And the dude looked like a superhero. His chest was so big that like you could have sat a drink on it when he walked. And he had like long hair, gold chain, kind of had like a mullet. And the dude was so jacked. Like he looked like a superhero. And people were just like parting like the Red Sea.
No shit.
And we just started following him. we were like, who is this? And he kind of like turned and like kind of stomped at us a little bit, and we like backed up, and the dude proceeded to like, and then to get up to the parking lot was probably about 100 yards, like a pretty vertical deal.
Huh.
And he started running up and down it, and we just sit there and watched him. And I remember thinking like that day, I want to lift weights.
Nice.
And I didn't know why. I just knew that like something was unique about this guy. And that dude was a pro football player.
No kidding.
A guy named Lyle Alzado.
Holy shit, no.
Yeah. So if you guys Google him, Lyle Alzado,
Dude.
if you remember him, but in his prime,
Oh my God.
looked like a superhero.
I remember him.
Yeah, so
he was like,
yeah.
he was a Raiders.
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, he was like,
Yeah, defensive tackle for the Raiders.
dude, like watching guys like that play back then. Man.
Him and Howie Long.
That's
and,
what I was just going to say.
Yeah, and
Those two.
it was Lyle Alzado, Howie Long, Bob Golick.
Don't
And
remember him.
so he was a little bit later. But so I remember seeing this dude and thinking like, holy shit, like this dude looks like a superhero. And then, fast forward a couple of years, Art Shell's my Pee Wee basketball coach, and we go to
Get to watch him play.
Well, we get to play, but we get to go in the locker room and I get to meet these guys.
Oh, shit.
And so I meet like Bob Golick and Howie Long and these dudes and Lyle Alzado. And like, I'm like, holy shit, dude, this guy, like, it was really impactful for me.
So it's easy to see how that left an indelible mark on you because, I mean, it's hard not to in that sense.
Well, and my brothers played high school, and then they both played college football. So they were
Did they play at the same college you went to?
No, they ended up playing Division III.
So
And then I grew up in like Palos Verdes, Torrance, kind of that South Bay area, and then showed up, started playing football when I was a freshman, started lifting weights. I think I was tall. I was 6 foot, 163, I think, when I was a freshman in high school.
Ooh.
And then the next year I was like 215.
Oh,
And then I was like 230. And then I graduated, I was like 250, 260. So I gained almost 100 pounds and grew 4 inches in high school.
I remember when I was my path was not nearly the same as yours, but I had a growth spurt in high school that literally I can remember because I swam and played water polo. And all of our high schools swam at the same pool, big, giant, like Olympic-sized pool. And, we all competed against each other. And one of our rival high school coaches, when I came back from summer, like over the summer, I swam during that summertime. And over the summer, I just was like, because we had weight room, we had organized like training in the weight room. And I just followed, every day I showed up, every day I did the work. And then by the end of the summer, when school starts again, about a month into it, I had to go into the main coach's office with this rival coach and my head coach. And I had no idea what I was in trouble for. I knew I was in trouble, had no idea. And I'm not kidding you. She literally accused me of taking steroids when I was a kid. Like I was a sophomore summer to junior year.
You're like, what are steroids?
I didn't even know what the fuck steroids were. I didn't even have a fucking clue. Yeah. I was just like, and they all realized that this was ridiculous that she would accuse me of that. But I did. I had like made this major growth spurt. And like after that, I was kind of hooked too. I was like, okay. And our weight room wasn't the same. It was a different type of weight room. Like when I say our weight room, it was different. Like a true weight room that I'm accustomed to now defines what a weight room is. But back then, that's what I had. That's what I knew as a weight room. So, all right. So played in high school.
Yeah. So then I go out to, I start lifting weights. We go out and play football. I had zero experience, but I had all this fighting experience. So the first day we go out there and the coach is like, hey, I want you to do this. We're going to set up and then you're going to like punch your hands and like kind of do this. And this dude ended up, the guy like hit me, kind of got by me. And the next time the guy's like, well, before he gets there, just kind of like use your hands violently. And I was like, no problem. The next one I set and just like 2 hands shot the dude in the face and he went to the ground. And I like kind of stopped, looked around, thought I was going to get in trouble. And the coach was like, that's great. Do it again. And then I slowly realized that playing football was like fighting against dudes that didn't know how to fight. And they just didn't understand hand fighting. They didn't understand hand speed. And it was actually all the time, from jumping rope, speed bag, all the stuff that we did within the boxing training.
Yeah.
Was this huge platform at which I was able to build upon because I'd already developed all these skills. So then by the time I got to college and gone on to the NFL, it was, fast hands, big punch, quick feet, like all the things that I developed, especially like cutting a guy off in the ring.
Yeah.
Same thing,
Shit.
Yeah. I mean, like cutting a guy off a ring, picking angles, same thing as playing offensive line in terms of pass blocking and protecting the quarterback.
Oh, I love hearing that. And it's so funny too to hear you say that because, again, one of my football idols was Randy White.
Yeah.
And he was like one of the, at least as far as I know, and he was one of the first ones that was open about the fact that he was studying like things outside of the football world.
Sure.
He was studying with a world famous Thai boxer, Thai fighter. And, in his day, he was also impressive to watch. He was another one of my favorites. So,
well, you learn pretty early, especially like within fighting and boxing, using the first meaningful touch.
Yeah,
is very, very important. And same with football. You get a chance to have a first meaningful touch on every snap of the ball.
Yeah.
So my whole deal was like, how do I get onto the individual faster? So that became like anticipation. Just a lot of the skills that I developed that became within like the inherent I guess you could say skill set that I had.
Yeah.
Just the ability to be able to move through space and see things happen. I also have some, I don't know, maybe genetic adaptation or whatever, where
I would say so.
Well, I was always real strong. But I was also really like, as I go through this, like there's so many luck pieces in this.
For sure. Yeah.
So when I was a freshman, I started lifting weights, but there was like 100 kids in a room and we weren't very well coached. Yeah. There was like one coach over there reading a magazine. So as I grew taller, there were certain kids within like kind of that area. There was an old power lifter that lived in our neighborhood. Yeah. And he would kind of show up at the high school and kind of help a little bit. He had a supplement company and, would, like back when like a vitamin store.
Oh, and, right on. Yeah.
So he was like kind of, around the neighborhood. And there were certain kids in the neighborhood where he would like kind of tap them and be like, hey, you got some potential. Why don't you come train with me? Ooh. So he reached out when I was 15 and I started and he was like, hey, we squat on Saturdays. Do you want to show up? So I told my dad and my dad's like, sure. So my dad drops me off and we show up the first day. And I like sat there for a couple hours because everybody was lifting weights and I kind of had to just rack weights like first day.
That was your penance?
Well, that was my day.
You had to earn it.
And I remember my dad shows up. He's like, I'm like, I haven't lifted weights yet. He's like, okay, I'll be back. Just was hilarious now that my dad just like dropped me off at some like weird old dude's house. Dude. And then came back a couple hours later and just was like waved me off. And so then I finally got to train. George was a powerlifting coach like the Thompson powerlifting team with like Bill Kazmaier and those guys on it. He was like buddies with like Fred Hatfield and all these like world-class individuals. And George was a big time powerlifter, invented the super suits and the wraps, and was just like a real big figure within powerlifting. So I remember it went from like Saturday I would train with him till like Sunday evening, and then it became like Monday and Tuesday, and then it became like 4 or 5 days a week. After work I'd go over to his house. Wow. And we would do 4-day split, and then I would also train at the high school with the team. Whoa. And then I'd go over, so we were pretty much doing 2-a-days. And it was just the mentorship of George, things like I remember we were benching one time, and he there's a pretty interesting principle that Fred Hatfield created called compensatory acceleration. The idea is that as mechanical advantage increases, so does speed. So the idea, like when you watch most people lift weights, like the weight, like the bench press, for example, is going to be heaviest at the bottom. Right. So then people like max as hard as they can, and then they kind of get into this like slowdown when they get to the top. Right. So what Fred theorized was obviously the weight is heaviest at the bottom, but as the weight gets lighter and it's coming up as mechanical advantage increases, now you have to continue to move the bar as fast as possible. Interesting. And so George said, hey, if you can master compensatory acceleration, you're not only going to be stronger, you're going to be more explosive and more violent. That makes a lot of sense. And so his comment to me, and as we were kind of going through it, he's like, I want you to be as violent with the weight as possible. I want you to try to break the weights. And he said, don't lift weights like old people have sex, slow and careful. I want you to be as violent as possible. And I was like, okay, old people having sex? Like, it's a funny image. I've never seen old people have sex. I've never either. But he's like, I'm like, are you telling me old people are slow and careful? He's like, yeah, just fucking be violent. He goes, I want you to try to break the weights. I never thought of it that way. I want you to try to, if people want to watch you lift weights, I want you to, like, for them to see the violence in the weights. And so I started using that. And, with, whether it be the squat, the deadlift, and any of the lifts, there was always a violent nature as mechanical advantage increased. I love that. So it ended up translating very well into football. So if you think about a punch, right? So you bring your hands up, and then as mechanical advantage, most people just kind of place their hands. What I was trying to do was punch my hands through people and like end up on the other side.
Absolutely.
So it resulted in a much more violent, more violent individual, more violent punch, real violent with the hitting of my head. Same thing. So if I was going to hit somebody with my head, I wasn't just trying to hit them. I was trying to put my head through them. And it just it came down to the point where, people.
So that was the thing, actually headbutting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. I used my head like a weapon. It was
shit.
Yeah. I called it my third hand. So it was a triangle, right?
Makes sense.
So as you punch, the head would become the third, and then you could, just like in boxing,
it's a leverage. Where the head goes, the body follows.
Well, and also you could feel people like as their momentum shifts on the face. I was quick enough to play nose to nose with people, and then basically put them into a position and force them to try to out athlete me. Most guys, when you watch offensive line play, they punch and they want to keep guys far away from them because they don't have the athleticism to make up quick moves because the defensive linemen are so fast.
Yeah,
I would stick a dude with my hands and I would play up on him, and then I would just force him to out athlete me, and a lot of times they couldn't.
Dude.
And the reason being was that the shot with my head and hands was so stunning that it would stun them and completely change the trajectory, alter them, make them question whether or not they wanted to be there. So,
especially snap after snap after snap.
Well, that was my whole deal. Like I said, I thought kicking was stupid because we started watching. Like my dad was always a boxing fan.
Yeah.
So we watched Tommy Hearns, Marvin Hagler,
I love those,
Roberto Duran, but also Tyson was so impactful for me because Tyson he was so fucking violent. And
Dude, took
and,
it
and
to
the
a
ferocity
whole new level.
Yeah, so the ferocity, and the thing I remember was like Tyson's deal was like, I want them to question every fucking moment they've made in their entire lives from the minute I hit them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, dude.
So what I did is I just went big head, I went heavy, big and heavy to the head and to the body on these dudes, and I knew that if I went, real big to the heavy or real big and heavy to the head and the body, they were going to give up. And if they didn't give up, we were in, you were in store for a fucking heavyweight fight. But 99
4 rounds basically, 15-minute rounds.
99% of the dudes eventually just gave up. There was only a few that didn't. And I remember each one of them.
No, I'll bet they left that's like, okay.
This guy's going to bring it. And he was a bad one.
Those are the types of battles that, and that's the part that, unfortunately you don't see that as a fan per se. You don't see that.
But it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They effectively have changed pro football in such a way that they've removed a lot of that from the game.
Through penalties, how?
Well, I mean, what they started doing is they we would go out and play, and then all of a sudden on Monday morning, Tuesday morning, you get like a FedEx in your locker where you've been fined $15,000 for something they thought was
inappropriate or something?
Violent.
Oh,
and they started talking about this history of violence and that you've shown a history of violence, and so they just started finding people to the point where
you become neutered.
Yeah.
Fuck.
I mean, well, there's
really. When did that start?
Right around 2004, 2005, and it kind of extended, and then it got real kind of like after that CBA, after the strike in 11, 12, 13, kind of that time period. I mean, but just I'll for the spectators that know, most of the quarterbacks, if they played 7 to 10, 11 years as an NFL player, that was an incredible fucking career.
Yeah.
Now you have Tom Brady in 20 plus years still playing at that level. Dude, and he's the first one to tell you, if they hadn't changed the rules, I could never have played this way.
Absolutely.
Because now they can't touch quarterbacks in this. And I mean, like when I came in the NFL, if a dude was in his 10th, 11th, 12th year, he looked like he'd been aged in dog years.
Yeah, exactly.
Now all of a sudden you see these guys, and I remember, I got 10 years, and Tony Gonzalez went on and played 17, and I was best man at Tony's wedding. We were always real close. And after the strike and then the new CBA came in,
what is CBA for everybody?
Collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
So that's the deal that the players make and the players union makes with the league, and it's kind of they collectively bargain it. After that strike and then that new CBA came in, they could only go like 5 or 7 padded practices the entire year. So when I came in the NFL in '99,
the quarterbacks could only do that. Is that what you're saying?
No. Andy Reid's first year in Philadelphia, we had 42 days of training camp.
Yeah.
We went pads in the morning, pads in the evening, pads in the morning, and then we had a special teams practice.
Okay.
Which we didn't have to go to. So we'd go out of 2 days, we'd have 4 practices. 3 were in pads, and they were 2 to 2.5 hours, 9 on 7, 1-on-1. I mean, inside run, like it was legitimate, like fucking let the bodies hit the floor, like fucking drowning pool every day for 42 days.
Holy shit.
Then after the next CBA, the entire season, you could only have like 5 to 7 padded practices.
What?
So they would only have 2 to 3 padded practices in training camp and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 over the course of the rest of the year. So we effectively
that just blows my mind.
Yeah, it was something like it. I forget how it went, but it was like 3 out of every 2, 42. So it was like 60 some padded practices. We calculated the hours. It was like 180 hours of hitting that we had gone through.
Right.
And these dudes are like 5 to 7 padded practices. So just think about the longevity. Wow. And I did that for years. And then I went and played for Dick Vermeil, who was the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, just the volume that we hit within training camp and within, the regular season.
Yeah.
Like that gives you, I mean, that's your expiration. There's 10 years.
Yeah.
In this present deal, I remember Tony when, after that, he's like, dude, he called me. He's like, dude, you could have played 20 years in this league. He's like, I could play 20 years in this league but the problem is that we have so much mileage on the backside of us. There's no way we're getting there.
Yeah.
He's like, if we had come in today, like you'll see guys now like 17, 20 years. It'll be more consistent.
Interesting. That did kind of like it seemed to me like an average, and I don't know, I'm guessing an average lifespan of a pro NFL player, regardless of position, was somewhere between 8 and 12 years.
No, it was 3 years.
3 years.
So 3 years is the average.
Fuck.
Or it was. I mean, but you got to remember, I think it was I went to I got invited to a meeting. It was like 2000 and maybe 11 or 12. So this is probably about 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Troy Vincent, who I played with in Kansas or in Philadelphia, he was a bigwig with the NFLPA. So he had this big meeting and I got invited to. And I remember, this had to be maybe 12 or 13. So my kids weren't born yet. Or no, my kids were little. So it was they're about 10. So we show up to this meeting and he put up this statistic where he said over the course of the NFL, 20 to 30,000 guys have effectively played in the NFL. Less than 1,000 have played longer than 4 years.
What?
So now obviously that number's changed a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the time,
that's crazy.
And you're like, no. And then they start showing the names and you're like, oh yeah, I know every one of these dudes. And like we could sit around and name them if you thought about it.
Yeah.
But like the amount of dudes that are able to play at least at that time period. And I remember like when I came in, I mean, there were dudes that were in their 7, 8 years and these guys were fucking hammered. Yeah. Now all of a sudden I see Tom. Tom looks better today in his 40s than he did in his 20s.
Fuck, dude.
So, I mean, he's either drinking the blood of
young children.
Of young children and he's got a couple seances. Maybe he's got a Ouija board. I mean, maybe he's figured out something that we don't know, which I would imagine he has. But or I don't know, maybe being married hot to Giselle is the fucking fountain of youth.
A benefit in some way.
But it's just the game has changed. They've turned it into effectively like a 7-on-7 passing deal. Where, they want to see points. They have these, $500 million quarterbacks that they don't want some fucking knucklehead rolling up on. So they've effectively changed the rules in such a way where the defensive ends don't pass rush. So it's just a different game.
Interesting.
And I was kind of like in the twilight of like how the game used to be.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of at the tail end of it.
Yeah.
And then right as my career, came to an end, there was just a huge transition to what it is today.
So it sounds like basically the kind of like the beginning of the end for the NFL of sorts, as we knew it growing up, was the multi-million-dollar athlete that became an asset.
No, I think what happened was so regardless of what people want to believe, the NFL is a media company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? They are 100%. They're even though they're all nonprofits, which is another interesting one. Every team's a nonprofit. I don't know if you guys knew that.
I did not know that.
So they do that for tax ramifications because they don't pay taxes.
Holy shit!
Yeah, it's super wild.
That's crazy. Yeah, I can't even begin to imagine how much money rolls through the doors there.
Well, that's why that dude, one of the Waltons, just paid $4.5 billion for the Denver Broncos. Do you think that he's paying that money because he's not going to be able to make that money in a couple years? I was going to say,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So, the NFL. I
didn't even know about that sell.
Yeah, it just sold the other day.
Oh, wow.
And he basically came in at $4.5 billion, which is the highest that any team. And the Broncos are great. Don't get me wrong.
I love the Broncos, yeah.
But it just gives you an idea of the money they're making. But
that does put it in perspective.
What happened was players started killing themselves. So you got this is kind of close to me in a lot of ways in that my welcome to the NFL moment happened with Junior Seau.
I love that, man.
I was playing left guard, and we were playing San Diego, and I remember we were running a play. So we were running we were on the left hash. We were going to run like a sweep outside play to the right, to the open field.
Yeah.
And we put all the receivers on the left, and Junior, who had zero responsibility other than to just make plays, he walked out on one of the receivers, and I knew based off of the assignment that he was my guy. And I'm looking, and I'm like, okay, this dude's like 10 to 12 yards outside of me, and we're running this way. All I'm going to do is I'm going to sprint as fast as I can. I'm going to get to a position. I'm going to peel back and knock him out. All of a sudden, the ball snaps, gets tossed. That dude ran over the top, and I had like an angle on him, and he still beat me across and made a tackle on that sideline. And he after he like popped up and he patted me on the back and he said like basically like good job, Rook. Nice job. Rook, yeah, like good job, Rook. Like maybe one day. And
that's a pretty rude awakening to the NFL.
So then he was a handful. Like he's probably the best player I ever played against. And then the next year we went to the Pro Bowl. So I'm there at the Pro Bowl as an alternate, and I see Junior, and he's like goes over and we sit down. He's buying me drinks, and he's like, "You're with me." And that dude proceeded to like drink me under the table every single night. I couldn't get away from him. And I remember we went out. We had a bunch of drinks. Get back like 3 a.m. I'd go out on the balcony to go throw up. Yeah. And I'd look out and I see him running on the beach. Jesus. And the only thing in my head, I'm thinking like, warrior, this guy's such a savage. Like, how the fuck did this guy drink all night? He drank me under the table and he's out running. Yeah. He couldn't sleep. Yeah. Like in my mind, I'm thinking like, dude, this dude's, harder than coffin nails. Yeah. And, little did we know, he couldn't sleep. And like he had to drink himself into oblivion to try to sleep, and he couldn't sleep. Yeah. And the only way he could do was try to exercise. I mean, like, seeing him kill himself and when a guy basically is like, dude, he was, invincible. He was Superman, and he's the nicest, best player.
I got a chance to meet him one time, and he left, and then, like when you mentioned his name, I immediately flashed back to the experience that I had with him. Short, incredible. 10 minutes at most.
And he treated everybody like they were like the biggest star in his life. He was so
100%
like just like
humble and very, engaging. Like he was at a charity event, and we were there. I was stationed on the West Coast, and we showed up as part of a Navy kind of like fly the flag kind of thing. And the reason it was on the weekend, and the only reason why I volunteered to do it was for the off chance of get into like, I think there was a bunch of other big names that were going to be there. Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be there. Another big name was going to be there. But the reason why I wanted to go was for the off chance of getting a chance to meet Junior. Yeah. And I did. It was like, again, sure, there's like 3 or 4 of us all together. He came over and rapped with us for like 10 minutes before he got pulled away. You could tell he didn't want to go. Sure. And dude, that 10 minutes of my life was just such like impacting.
There was no act in that.
No,
and
none.
He was just an amazing human.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have these dudes killing themselves.
Yeah.
That's when all of a sudden the NFL gets into this image problem. And they knew that they were going to have to make a change.
That makes absolute sense.
Now, the change that they made, effectively neutered the game, but also TV. It kind of hit everything at the right level. And then all of a sudden, shit goes through the roof. And they're paying these guys. But realistically, the NFL was having huge problems with just image. When you have a guy like Junior Seau, Hall of Famer, rock star lettuce.
Everybody knows him.
And he puts a gun in his chest and it's like, a note like, look at my brain. And then you like Dave Duerson and a bunch of these other guys, same thing happens. Now all of a sudden, and then that CTE movie comes out. Yeah. And so this is a huge image problem. So what the NFL has done very, very well, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars to try to weave the NFL into the fabric of America. Yeah. Right? Like think about like Thanksgiving.
Yeah. For sure.
All these different like moments in these games that people have now like tied
associated
synonymous
with it. Yeah.
Like, oh, we're watching
Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. We're watching Dallas. Yeah. We're watching Cowboys.
Usually Cowboys or
Lions. Well, it's Lions. And then the third game they added when I was there was the Chiefs, because old man who, what's his name? Not Art Rooney. He's from the Steelers, but it'll come to me in a second. Our owner, who's the guy that started the AFC, he at the Chiefs had always wanted to play on Thanksgiving. So like,
cool.
Yeah, at the very end,
he got it.
Yeah,
he got what he wanted.
But just they've spent hundreds of $millions to try to weave the NFL into the fabric of America, and they've done it.
Yeah,
they've done it very well.
I agree. I mean, you think about it. I mean, they have, for all practical purposes, have in a sense replaced baseball with America's pastime.
Yeah,
if you think about it.
Well, so what killed baseball was they had the strike.
Yeah,
and then they brought back, and then you remember the Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds home run thing that sparked it. But then it was the guys were juiced, the ball was juiced, and then everybody lost confidence in baseball.
So true.
And football really surpassed them. The crazy thing on the NFL is, and then the other big issue that they've always had is the violence towards women. Where you got like the Ray Rice punching his girl in the elevator, which to this day is still one of the most violent punches I've ever seen.
Holy shit.
And they suspended him until the video came out. And then once the video hit, they had to just fucking basically cut bait, and you're like, you're forever gone.
Dude,
and now
not recoverable.
Now you got the ex-Houston quarterback who just signed that big deal up in Cleveland.
Yeah. I'm on the tip of my tongue too. I know who you're talking about. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all that weird shit with hitting all those broads on Instagram, trying to get them to come over. And now it's come out that there was, like he said, there was 40, now there's 66 women. And then the other wild thing was they found out that Houston actually was supplying the hotel rooms and the NDAs for the ladies. So what happened was he probably got popped on this. And it was
they tried to do damage control,
and then they probably paid somebody off and kept it quiet. And then this was the damage control, like going forward, like don't do it at your house, just do it at a hotel. We'll give the NDAs, and they're trying to like manage this whole thing because he's their high priced quarterback
for sure.
And
see, that's what I was kind of getting at. It's like they're paying millions of dollars for these guys, and they can't risk an injury. With some of these guys, they can't risk not being able to start them because there's some legal issue over their head. So they, in effect, they have had to go in there and kind of be the cleaners of sorts. They have to clean up their own messes in many cases.
So when I came in the NFL, I got drafted to the Philadelphia Eagles. I was the 4th round pick for Andy Reid's first year in Philly. And as I was stretching, I came in and started as a rookie. And I remember I was stretching in training camp, and our GM at the time, a guy named Tom Modrak, who since passed away, rest in peace. Great dude, comes over to me, kneels down, and he's kind of rapping me like, how's it all going? You look like you're doing pretty well. And he goes, just know you were my pick in this draft.
Oh, shit.
So he's like, I went to bat for you. Just know that like our fates are tied, right? Like I went on the line for you. And I was like, okay.
That's fucking cool.
Well, it was just kind of an interesting statement. And he's like, so remember, our fates are tied. The other one I want you to remember is never forget. The NFL is a violent game played by violent individuals who get paid a lot of money to do violence on behalf of old white men. As long as you remember that, you'll be fine.
Interesting.
And,
okay.
And he goes, we're not the Little Sisters of Mercy. We're not the charities. It's not this. We're not benevolent. Like for all the bullshit that you see and all like the circus and all the things they want to send you to, never forget violent game played by violent individuals who get paid a lot of money to do violence on behalf of old rich white men.
Makes sense.
So as long as you never forget it, you'll be fine. And I made no illusions about what I did. So whenever people would kind of, talk about this and with this, I'm like, I get paid to be violent and I'm fine with that. Now they're paying me to be violent on the field, and I pay me to be violent in a fucking bar.
Exactly.
And I think what happens is guys get some money, they get this. I had so much experience, not only with on the field, but also like within like the ring and the dojo and all that other stuff that, that was
more controlled.
Well, there was,
or I should say you were more exposed to it earlier and managed it through that exposure.
I never felt like there was like the best people in the world. Like I got to fight in battle and basically one-on-one fist fight I do for 3 hours every Sunday in front of millions of people wearing our game unis. I get to fight the toughest people on the planet every Sunday. I don't really necessarily have to go out to a bar and try to prove myself to some fucking fat, drunk shithead at some bar. So it just didn't make any sense to me. And also somebody says something like, I'm like, all right,
whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave with my uber hot girlfriend and go get my Porsche and drive home. Fuck
See ya.
off. Yeah, go eat a cheesesteak, fatty.
Oh my god.
So it was just kind of a different mentality. But a lot of guys can't, wrap their heads around that, and they can't separate. Well, and the other one is, I'm totally forgetting that Houston quarterback's name.
Yeah, me too. I'll figure it out.
I'll
add it.
It'll come.
Yeah.
But like, the fact that he was like hitting up chicks on direct message, like, and trying to get them to do weird shit. Like, he should have just hired professionals and
be done with it.
Yeah, just
Discretion.
go out. Yeah, like, I mean, people, like, what was it Charlie Sheen said when they were like, Mr. Sheen, you've, you're a star of, big screen and the silver screen and TV and this, you're this big star. Like, why did, within the Heidi Feist book, like, why did you have to pay this many prostitutes? Like, couldn't you have gone out and met other girls? He's like, whoa. I didn't pay him for sex. I paid him to leave and to keep their mouth shut.
Yeah.
So in a way, like it was, I mean, to this day, Charlie Sheen is still the most gangster motherfucker on the planet. When he came out and he said that, and like some like they tried to roast him, like they had like one of those like Deus roasts on whatever, like Comedy Central,
something. Yeah.
And like they went in and tried to get him.
Owns that shit,
and
man.
He's like, I'm like Teflon. Like there's no way that any of this shit sticks to me. So, the problem is that you're in this really interesting space where you're, young, you have a lot of money, you're, good looking dudes are in shape, you're on TV. So you have this kind of like celebrity thing,
man.
Athlete. I mean, there was a reason that in ancient Rome, when, the gladiators who were slaves fought, women would pay exorbitant amounts of money to basically sneak into their bedchambers, and to the point where like they would take it's like a long thing, slingy deal. They would cover them olive oil and they would scrape all of that into bottles. Yeah. And then they would sell that as like aphrodisiacs and like perfume to rich women.
That's hilarious.
So like this is the version of like, whether it be professional basketball, like this is today's gladiators.
It is.
So like to think that human nature is any different than it was thousands of years ago. It's
evolution is evolution.
The problem is that now you have this really interesting thing where like, now I can make a buck, and not that these women are making a buck, whatever, but like he DMs them, they don't have to respond.
That they do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And then they get there and who knows what kinky shit the dude's into. But it's a very weird thing with like power in this. I mean,
power.
It's like,
especially when you didn't have it before, and now you have it, and you have an unlimited source of power.
Well, you got unlimited money, you have fame, you have all of these things which are considered like it's funny in our society today. Those are up here like integrity, honesty, your word means something, hard work. All that shit is like a punchline, even though that's what I built my entire life on.
Yeah.
Whereas like all this other kind of flat. It was funny. On social media, a guy who's been to our seminar that I know, it's like him like posing with like another dude with like their Lamborghinis, and they're like, oh yeah, this. Right. And I was laughing, thinking like, my track loader and my cat, excavator is worth way more than that Lambo. Yeah. I mean, I'm not out there posting a picture of like my truck and my trailer and this. I'm like, dude, I can buy a few Lambos for what I got in terms of like farm equipment. Yeah. Like, it's just weird that like, I post that, people wouldn't give two shits when you post a Lambo. But for me, I see that and I'm like, ooh, that guy's got a cat excavator with a mulching head. I'm like, holy shit, fuck the Lambo. You know how much work I can do with that? So it's just different in terms of that. But I really enjoyed, for me personally, like I didn't enjoy any of that shit. Yeah. I didn't enjoy the fame. I didn't enjoy the notoriety. Like, it was fine. Like like when I retired, people were like, you going to miss it? I never heard the crowd anyway. Every game that I ran into, everything was deathly silent. Nice. So I was saying, I don't know if it's a genetic or whatever, but every game that I played, as soon as I got down in my stance, everything was deathly quiet. I never heard anything. Yeah. And all I saw was just people moving. Yeah. And I just never like the roar of the crowd is what people miss. I never heard it anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal. What is there to miss? Yeah. But what I liked was I'd still show up and do that exact same job if it was in a fucking alleyway with nobody watching, because it was addictive, because you got to train. You got to basically train as much as you want, sharpen your blade, and then go out and use that motherfucker and try to basically fuck up the best people in the world. They're trying to do the same to you. Yeah, they're trying to do the same to me. Absolutely. And they're well matched. Yeah, they've had all the opportunities. They've sharpened their blade. Now I get a chance to know exactly how good bad I am every day. That's got like so. I mean, I can so sympathize with that thought. It's like, and I want to do something real quick. I want to go back. So you got involved with what would be maybe a mentor in the power lifter. Yeah. Early in high school, and then did you? There was another guy. So. When I left the John Barrett kickboxing deal, when I went to go play football, and I ended up going back and training and doing a bunch of boxing stuff with a guy who was a real good stand-up fighter. He was actually a Hapkido guy, but he was also a French Foreign Legion military guy.
Yeah.
And so he knew boxing. And so we would go in there and box at his place. He ended up, his name is Nono Lebontier. And Nono's son is a UFC fighter. And Nono was the guy that the Gracies brought in to teach them to stand-up fight when everybody started watching their stuff. So like the old Gracie studio, which is off of Carson Street in Torrance, like there's a place behind it, all-you-can-eat sushi restaurant, Todai, if anybody's listening that knows. I grew up in Palos Verdes. My dad's office was on Torrance Boulevard.
Nice.
Like that old, like there was this all-you-can-eat sushi.
To be around there that time period.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So Nono was the guy they brought in, so we used to go and do some training with those guys. But Nono was another mentor of mine. And then George and those two individuals, I still count like a lot of, I guess those guys still carry a lot of weight in my life.
For sure. Well, you were at such a young, impressionable age, and they fed you exactly what you wanted. You didn't know what you want, but they did, and they fed it to you. So my question to you was going to be, when you made the decision to go to college, did you go to college because you got the full ride scholarship, or did you go to college because you wanted the education?
So when, like I was saying, when I grew up, my dad was really smart.
Yeah.
Like my dad graduated high school at 16, graduated college at 19, graduated law school in 21, working a job, working nights. So my dad was, to this day, probably one of the smartest people I've ever met.
Wow.
One of the funny jokes, especially on Power Athlete Radio, whatever, whenever the guys try to, talk shit or we ended joking, they're always like, dude, you move so fast. I'm like, yeah, you guys didn't grow up with a really smart, condescending father like I did. Like I've been
perfecting my game for a long time.
And, my dad was a trial attorney for over 50 years. So,
Damn.
I mean, he passed away at 80. So, I mean, he was literally like for 55 years, worked as a DA, criminal defense, like worked the nasty murder stuff. Oof. And my brother does the same thing. So my brother and my dad, and we're all very skilled in terms of this. And so my dad's super sharp, really smart, probably to this day, one of the smartest people I'd ever known, and always knew him to be that way. And our next door neighbor was a orthopedic surgeon, guy named Lynn Wilson. And my dad and Lynn were buddies. And I heard my dad say one time that Lynn Wilson was actually the smartest dude he'd ever met.
Oh shit! So
Lynn had like a photographic memory,
Ooh.
like had a double major at Berkeley, like went to med school, just really sharp dude. And I remember asking my dad, I was like, really? He's really smart? And he's like, yeah, he went to Berkeley. That's all where all the really smart people go. And so my dad had gone to LA State. And so it was when I ended up getting like 100 scholarship offers.
Yeah.
And I took trips to SC, UCLA, Colorado, Nebraska, and then Cal were my 5. And I remember I went to Berkeley and I was going to get a scholarship. And I remember, Dad, what do you think? Where should you go? And he's like, I don't know, Lynn Wilson went to Berkeley. And I remember thinking like, well, because here's the thing. Like, I didn't know. I mean, obviously when I was a kid, I got to go to that NFL game.
Right.
And there were a couple white dudes, but most of the dudes were black. Mm-hmm. So like, I just didn't know any white dudes that ever really played the game. And I knew they were all quarterbacks. And like, I wasn't a quarterback.
Yeah.
So I just figured like,
what's the point?
Yeah, like what's the point? And then you always hear they're like, 3 years in and out, like people don't really play that long.
Yeah.
So I figured like, well, shit, if this is my future and there isn't a real great future to go play in the NFL potentially, I should go to the best school I can to get a degree to hang on my wall.
Yeah.
So I went to Berkeley. Showed up. I got my BA in rhetoric, which is like an English philosophy degree with an argumentative approach.
Oh, I've heard you rap like that,
which is pre-law.
Yeah.
And then applied, and in my 5th year, I still had another year to play football because I redshirted. I got into the School of Education, did my master's in education.
Oh shit! And
then applied and was going to go to law school because they had a scholarship for a 4-year letterman to go to Bolt Hall, which is the law school at Berkeley. So I applied for that. It was called the Adrian Cragen Scholarship. And Adrian Cragen, who was the dean of the law school, actually was the guy that when I went on my trip, I met with.
No shit.
Yeah, and he like took me around, and he was in his 80s. He was an old dude. But he knew the old lawyer that apprenticed my father. So my dad, I was like, oh, my dad's a lawyer. He's like, where? And he's like, oh, in Southern California. And he's like, oh, I knew a few lawyers. I'm like, well, there was an old lawyer, and I knew the lawyer, the old guy my dad apprenticed, because he had a house down in Palm Springs that we would go to when we were kids, and he had these huge grapefruits. It's funny. It's all you remember.
That's all you remember.
I just remember we used to get these massive grapefruits, and he would like cut them in half and put sugar on them, and I thought they were the best.
I love those.
Yeah, they were these huge ones. And his name was Kent Redwine, So when I mentioned it, he's like, I knew Kent. He was a Hollywood attorney and I was a Hollywood attorney and this guy was a Hollywood tax attorney. So at that point, he was like, we have this scholarship. Like when you're ready to graduate, hit me up and it's to go to Bolt Hall and I can help you get in this. And I was like, done. Like I'm on my track.
Sweet.
And then he was the one that I recommended. I want you to be a rhetoric major. So it's this unique, but there's only a few schools that have it, but it's really, we read 40 books a year, read and write to the best of your ability. And everything's from an argumentative approach. So it'll train your brain, which would be perfect for law school.
Yeah.
So that was what my path was. And I never deviated from it. And I loved it. I got to read, I got to write, I got to argue, I got to talk. I got to, read all of, the classics from antiquity. I mean, everybody from like Cicero to Seneca. And it's funny now that now it's become very fashionable to talk about this. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, I knew this, I knew the Stoics before when they were cynics.
Yeah.
And like that was we read everything. And then what was cool was I had some just a really smart, amazing professors that, were from some really bitchin' places. And it was an incredible major for me personally. So I go get drafted by the Eagles and I show up. And
did you expect that? Because you were fourth round. That's pretty
what was wild was that I had teams calling me with being like, hey, we're going to take you with our second round pick. And so I thought I was going to the second round. And then back then it was the first 3 rounds were on the first day, then the rest were on the second day.
Right.
So I didn't get drafted that first day. And I was so fucking pissed because my friends and family were there we were just at the house hanging out with my brothers, my mom and dad, but people kept calling. Hey, did you get drafted? I'm like, no, I didn't get fucking drafted.
God damn it.
So we were going to go to dinner if I got drafted and we did. And I was like, I just want to go to bed. So we just went to bed. And then it would have been 8 a.m. The draft started at 9. We're on the West Coast. So 6 a.m. at 6:04, the phone rings. And I'm laying there in bed. I'm like, fucking, I ain't answering it.
No way.
And so my brother's wife, she's there and she gets up and answers the phone and she's yelling at me, John, you just got drafted. And so we go turn on the TV and I grab the phone. And it's like, hey, and I don't know who drafted me.
Yeah.
So we're waiting to see the ticker and it's the Eagles. And at the time, I'm Southern California, Northern California.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know where Philadelphia is.
No.
I got to look it up on a map. So I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like the fucking Eagles. I figured
that's hilarious.
There was it just was a kind of a shock, but I go out there and so pretty interesting in my life. My brother, Ed, who has always been by far my best friend in the world.
Yeah.
And really my coach and mentor. And we start talking about mentors, my brother, Ed, has been the rock in my life. And I remember when I went to college, he told me something funny. He goes, college is a lot like prison. College football is a lot like prison.
Oh, okay.
Right. The first day you show up, you got to look for the biggest dude and fight him. And if you fight him, you'll instantly have respect. And if you don't, you're going to have to fight every day. So just make it happen quick. And so I did that. And so when I was getting ready to go out there, he calls me and he's like, you know the deal. Look for the biggest dude and fucking curb stomp him. And then you'll be fine. So I did. So we were in mini camp and I'm playing left tackle and there was a dude playing next to me, a guy named Glenn Roundtree. And there was I kind of assessed the deal. There was this dude named Bill Johnson, 8-year defensive tackle, was kind of the leader of the defense. He's playing right defensive tackle. And so Glenn, who was a big, strong dude, not great feet, Bill takes him and throws him down. And in the NFL, if you fall to the ground, you're not going to play very long. So when you watch an NFL game, look to see how many people are on the ground. Nobody. And the deal was if you fall down once, it's fine. You fall down twice, people will be like, get this fucking guy out of here because people trip and fall and hurt themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
So as an offensive lineman, if you play on the ground, you don't play.
Yeah.
So something happened. He shook him, clubbed him. Glenn goes to the ground, rolls at him, whatever. Bill falls over and he basically, while he's on the ground, starts punching him.
Who's Bill started punching?
Yeah, punching the Glenn Roundtree on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I see this and the light bulb goes off, here's my chance. So I run and spear the dude and basically knock him on his back, proceed to grab him by the helmet, and I just start dropping haymakers on him. And
day one.
Yeah, or this is day 2 somewhere there.
Early.
Yeah, first mini camp. So both benches clear, huge fight, helmets get ripped off, people are this. This is Andy Reid's first mini camp, right? This is his first deal with the vets.
And you're fucking it all up.
And here's some 4th round draft pick fucking rookie dipshit over here fucking beating up his fucking defensive lineman. So he like fucking throws us out of practice, fucking screaming this whole deal. And he's fucking pissed or whatever. And I'm thinking in my head, like, fuck, I'm probably going to get cut.
I'm going to get cut.
Yeah, I'm going to get cut. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I did what I came to do. I found the biggest dude, fucking beat his fucking ass. And like, if I get cut today, then you know what?
So be it.
So be it.
Oh, fuck.
So minicamp ends. And then we come back for OTAs, which happens like, so you have minicamp, they kind of like do players, and they have this thing called organized team activities,
okay,
where you come back, which is like before you go to training camp. And I come back and I walk in, and like a bunch of those old dudes that were there, they weren't there anymore.
Oh.
And so all of a sudden, like I'm like, hey, what happened to those old guys? I'm like, you're the guy, you're the starter. So I was the starting right tackle.
No shit.
So then I come out of training camp starting right tackle. And then in that first NFL start, we were at home versus the Arizona Cardinals.
Okay.
So I remember end of the second half, I sat back and I took a step inside. And I don't know if you ever remember, but Old Veteran Stadium was like basically like this, but painted concrete.
Yeah.
And they had these huge gaps in the turf. So like where the turf, like it had seams where it pulled away.
Oh yeah.
So I stepped back, and I stepped inside, and I planted my left foot, and my foot got caught underneath the turf.
Dude.
And then I got hit. And so when the guy hit me, I took the load and actually ruptured my patellar tendon.
Oh, dude.
So all of a sudden my patellar tendon ruptures, kneecap shoots up too high to the right, and my career's finished. It's over. So they cart me off the field, and I'm in there. They x-ray it, and the doctor comes in and goes, oh, you ruptured your patellar tendon, mid-patellar rupture, you ruptured the retinaculum, everything's gone. We've never had anybody come back from this injury. This is technically the end of your career.
No shit.
So here I am, get to this, first NFL career, and end of the second half, or end of the second quarter, right before the halftime, fucking done. So they tell me this, and my parents were at the game. So they tell my mom and dad, and they come in, and my mom and dad are trying to do this, and I look over and I like see like one tear stream down my dad's face, and I had never seen my dad cry in my life.
Dude.
So at that point, so I'm also really like, we had a dude on our podcast, again, Colin O'Brady, who's like had all this, like he basically was like the first dude to ever walk across Antarctica unaided. Right, like pretty super gnarly dude in terms of all this stuff. And so he had a deal where he was like on vacation in Thailand and like jumped over, like was like jumping on a flaming rope and basically set himself on fire and almost burned himself to death. So he's like laying in a hospital room. His mom comes in and she's like, I want you to plan. We're going to come up with these goals, and like to honor his mom, he did this stuff. I'm the fucking exact opposite. Right, the doctor said you'll never play again, which technically to me means fuck these people. I'm going to prove everybody wrong in the world. Yeah. Like if the guy had come in and just been like, you got to go out there. Anybody? No, I'm like the exact opposite. Tell me all the shit I can't do, and I'm going to prove you wrong.
Fuck yeah.
So at that moment, like that's what I needed to hear. And so I took this singular approach of like, well, fuck, like I'm going to rehab this thing. But I wasn't necessarily trying to rehab to come back and play football. I was trying to rehab
to prove that guy wrong.
Well, to prove wrong, but just to be normal again.
Well, that's
I figured my NFL career was finished.
Right.
But like I was going to like, didn't want to walk with a limp. I didn't want to be this. And I'd already got paid a signing bonus, a couple $100,000. I was like, shit, I got some money in the bank. I'm going to like heal this thing, go out. I'll probably get cut next year. And then I'll just go to law school and I got a little money in the bank to pay for it. But I'm going to get a scholarship. I'll be fucking golden.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. So I rehab, bust my ass, train. All of a sudden, like they, it was, so I was living in Philly, single, 23 years old. No friends, living in a little downtown apartment. I didn't know anybody. And, Philly might as well have been Gotham City from a kid from California. So the only thing I had to do was I got up in the morning, I'd eat, I'd drive to the facility, I would rehab, I'd lift weights, I'd go home and sleep. And then there was a gym around the corner I'd go lift weights at. So I was training twice a day. Before I started, I got set up with a guy named Mauro De Pasquale. And Mauro did my first supplement deal. Mauro wrote a book called The Anabolic Diet, and he was really the father of carb cycling. So he was like the most cutting edge nutrition, bodybuilding, powerlifting guy in the world. And anytime you see anybody talking about carb cycling, it stems back from what Mauro was doing.
Oh, shit.
So Mauro hits me, Mauro did this. He's like, hey, I want to do your diet stuff. I'm like, great, you write it, I'll do it. So he puts my programming together, does my diet stuff. I end up at the time I was probably right around 300 pounds. All of a sudden I'm like, all I'm doing is training. So now I'm like 320, 320 something. And I remember telling him, like, I'm too big. And he's like, that was the point. We're going to put on as much size and muscle as we can, then we'll cut down. And I ended up bulking up to 320, 325. And then
Can't even imagine you at that.
Yeah,
man.
it was fucking huge. And then and then we did like a pretty gnarly cut, and I cut down to like 306, 307, and I was sub 10% body fat.
Dude.
So in my, I think it was in my third or fourth. Well, so then I'll just go through the story because it's actually a fairly decent story. So we show up to training camp, right? And I'm like the third string left tackle.
Yeah.
So I'd started right tackle the year before. I'm the third string left tackle. I had like trained my whole off season. Like I was in the best shape of my life, like ready to rock. And we go to training camp, and like in the off season, they'd signed a guy named John Runyon, paid him like $20 million to be our right tackle. So high price free agent. They basically paid this dude a ton of money to come play right tackle. I figure I'm not playing right tackle, right? So I'm playing like third string left tackle. And I'm just kind of like eyeballing it in my mind. I'm like, everything's healthy. I'm fine. I'm feeling great. And I'm thinking like, all right, well, like, hey, I'm just going to play out training camp. We'll see how I do. And I'll probably end up getting cut. So, but I'm like, hey, I want to like at least go out there and like see if my knee holds and kind of push it a little bit. So I'm playing third string left tackle. All of a sudden, like maybe the third or fourth day of training camp, Runyon tears an intercostal, like a rib muscle, and he's out. So they put his
out for like the day, or
no, he's out for like 2 weeks.
Whoa! So
he's out. So his backup goes in, and the dude's just absolutely getting shelled, like just getting murdered. So like they're looking around, and Andy Reid's like looking around. He's like, "Didn't you used to play right tackle for us?" And I was like,
Matter of fact, I did.
I did. I started half a game for you. And he's like, go play right tackle. So all of a sudden, I like set up, and I'm doing fine. Like I'm doing pretty well. And like all of a sudden, that dude's not shelling me. I'm punch is good. Everything's working fine. Like everything's moving real well.
Mobility good.
Yeah, everything's great. And so all of a sudden, we go in, and Runyon's still out. We go to the first preseason game, and I'm starting right tackle.
Nice.
The kid who had been the number one pick overall for the Cleveland Browns is who we were playing in in the first preseason game, left defensive end and playing right tackle. So I get a chance to go against, the number one pick in the draft. All the cameras are on him. All this, like they're trying to like get like as much hype. Yeah, talk him up. So we go out, and usually in the first preseason game, you'll play like a half. So like, they want to get this, and then kind of over the course of the preseason, you kind of play less. So we went out and played, like four series. So I ended up going out, and this dude doesn't have a tackle. He doesn't have a pressure. I ended up with like 3 knockdowns, just basically murdered this dude. And so at the end of the game, I come walking in, and like I can, as I'm walking in, I can see there's like 300 reporters standing around my locker, because we have our nameplates up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I walk in, and they're like, and they're like, did Andy Reid make a mistake in terms of paying John Runyon all this money when obviously you started right tackle the year before and were well matched to fucking handle the number one pick in the draft? And like they're hitting me with all this. And I like looked at him, and I was like, dude, have you seen John Runyon? Yeah. Like that dude's a beast. Like I'd pay him $10 million. Like, dude, he's like, that was an intelligence. Like he's a killer. Yeah. And they were like, they all like walked away.
You stole all their thunder.
Yeah. So then Tom Modrak, who's the GM, he like sees it, and like he walks over and he's like, dude, he goes, not only did you save us, like you just did us a solid. Like that was perfect. And I was like, hey man, it's the truth. That guy's a really good player. Yeah. Like I'm just a fucking schlub. And so we go back to training camp. Runyon comes back, and now I'm like kind of like, bouncing between left and right tackle a little bit. And so we go in training camp, and I had been drafted in the 3rd round. There was a guy who was drafted in the 3rd round, a guy named Doug Brzezinski, who they drafted as a guard, who had started 16 games as a rookie and was starting again at left guard. So Doug was struggling a little bit in training camp. We're running 9-on-7, which is basically an inside run drill. Okay. And he had to like, basically, I think it was like a trap play or an inside, like a little like kind of like basically the guard blocks, or sorry, the center blocks, and the guard steps around him and he runs up on the backer. So ball snaps, the center goes to hit the guy, and the dude blows Doug up and drives him back into the running back. And so they blow the whole place up, and fucking defense is dancing and going crazy. Right, mind you, it's like the middle of training camp. It's like 95 degrees. Like it's fucking like something out of a movie, right? Yeah. And so they get back in the huddle, and they're yelling, Doug, get your fucking, this. And they're like, same play on 2. So all of a sudden they go, same play, fucking same thing. Fucking gets blown up. They're fucking dancing defense. Defensive coordinators talking shit. All this.
Oh, that's not good.
So Andy fucking starts screaming, and he's like, basically, he's like, find a Doug. And he fucking looks around. And it was funny because the twos had just walked out, or the backups had just walked. And so I went to get water. I got water and I walked back real quick. And that was the second play. And all of a sudden he turns and he's like looking around and he like looks and he's like, Wellbourn, get in there, go play left guard.
No shit.
So he puts me in at left guard and they're like, same play, first sound. So at that point I knew like I got one chance. Like the 8 Mile, this is your one fucking moment. And I was like, all right, I know the ball's like they're, we went on 1, we went on 2, they're not expecting first sound. So I also knew that I got to get off the fucking rock. Right. So same defense, everything's lined up. I get off the rock. I catch the dude with his hand in the ground. I basically ear hold him. We came on. I mean, basically hit this dude. The center comes around, step around, hit the backer. And basically we run for a touchdown.
Nice.
And the fucking offense is going crazy. All of a sudden the whistle blows, the horn, to go to the next period. So I got that one play. And so we go back and now it's a 11-11 pass. And so Doug runs in there and I'm standing there. And so this is like basically like pass pro stuff. Like now, like when we're from a run drill, just a pure pass. So all of a sudden, like, the ball snaps. They're running some big like 5-7 step drop. He goes back. Doug gets beat on an outside swim move. Ooh. And the guy runs by, with his finger in the air screaming. Doesn't touch the quarterback, but just puts his finger up to know that I would have said,
I got you.
So at that point, fucking Andy's like, fucking Doug, get out of there. John, get in there. But for me, because I've been playing tackle, guard is a dramatically easier job to pass pro out of because it's like, a tackle, you're used to a dude way out there and you got to be real agile. At guard, it just was right in front of you. Yeah, it was right in front of you. So like I set up, boom, and I basically shut these dudes down. And so all of a sudden there's no pressures. Everything looks great, keeping the pocket, doing everything I could. So we blow it up. We go run to another drill and Andy walks over and he's like, this is permanent. You're the starter.
No shit.
So then I went for the starting left guard and ended up going on starting 16 games that next year and then went on and was the starter for the next 4 years for the Eagles at left guard.
I love it, man. Protecting loved ones and neighbors is a high calling. Over the last few years, men and women of all walks of life have chosen to exercise their Second Amendment right as first-time gun owners. Through education and training, families and communities are empowered to protect themselves and those around them. Daniel Defense advocates for individuals' rights to bear arms, which is why they manufacture 100% American-made, high-quality firearms backed with a lifetime warranty. To learn more, visit DanielDefense.com.
So sorry, that was a long-winded.
No, I love it though because that's exactly what I'm looking for. So like one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on board was to talk about adversity and talk about like failures and what you did to kind of come back. And I'm to be honest, knowing you the way I know you, that doesn't surprise me that you had that attitude. Like, fuck you. Don't tell me what I can't do.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm the same. I'm like, don't tell me what I can't do. If you can't help me, get out of my way.
Yeah. And it's like I've always, so I use the word like blessed. And I'm not like a deeply religious person, but I also am not arrogant enough to realize that like there's not some higher power in some way. When I use the word like blessed, I really think from whether it be from some higher power, divine intervention. I think whoever is you want to call, let's say God, just the like omnipotent figure, has allowed certain people to come into my life that have allowed me to be successful because of their mentorship and because I was open to it. So I remember one time I was sitting in confession, and this is years ago, and the priest made a good point to me. He said, be the type of person you want to bring into your life. So like, light attracts light, and dark attracts dark. Yes. So what I think I've always tried to be is pretty honest, pretty forthright, and very accepting that if somebody, and when we met, we went out and shot, and I was like, teach me everything you know.
Absolutely, like, dude. You're one of the best.
I know nothing. So I've taken this like always be a white belt. If you have a skill set that I don't and I want to learn it, I try to be as humble and open, as receptive to everything, because at the end of the day, that's the only way I'm going to get better. And so like, it's this constant growth mindset. And I think what because of it, amazing people have come into my life, and some of the smartest, like I can legitimately in my phone pick up, and I have a Rolodex of the fucking baddest human beings on the planet and the smartest, like my lifelines. Are so deep. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be from fucking quantum mechanics to time travel to this and this. I mean, there's because I've been so open and receptive, and also just the ability to help people and just not being a fucking asshole.
Well, first of all, that's a rarity. One of the things that you just said really resonated with me. I love the idea of being open, because like I remember as a young frogman, I got thrust into a very senior platoon and I was expected to know everything, and I knew shit, and I acted like I knew everything, and nobody believed it. And I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was before we actually deployed, when, you know, my sea daddy kind of pulled me aside and really kind of like brought down, like, he didn't drop the hammer on me, but he kind of basically said, listen, if you don't know, that's not a bad thing. What's a bad thing is when you refuse to open up to learn or know. And like after that, I was like a sponge, dude. I mean, I took everything and anything I could get my hands on. I mean, you name it. I mean, some of the schools I went to, I hated, like -2 school. Fucking who wants to go? That's like how to pack an aircraft. Like we have to, with all our hazmat shit. Like there's certain things that you have to do, but
spatial relationships.
Yeah, there's that, and like you know what can play well with others and what can't play well with others. So I went to that school and I was willing to go to it because I wanted to learn. And I've always tried to be, I love that analogy, you know, always be a white belt in that mindset. Just be willing to learn, be willing to open up. I don't have all the answers. Like the back of my shirt says it all. Like I know nothing basically. The only thing I know is that I don't know.
Sure.
And that to me, it took me a while to really get there. Like even though I kind of got introduced to that by my sea daddy, it really didn't resonate with me until much later in life. But like now, dude, I'm fucking like a sponge. Like I will take up everything. And it's like one of those things where, you know, you have that filter and you let everything sift through the filter and you take away what works for you, take away what is valuable to you, take away what impacts you.
It's Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do.
For sure. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know, keep what's useful, discard what's useless.
Exactly.
And it's also, if you guys are Dune fans, if you guys have read all the Dune books, the law of the Fremen.
That's true.
Know? I mean, the Fremen, the same thing, like cut off what's useless.
That's so true.
And just pare it back. I mean, so that, yeah, it's funny. I read all the Dune books in college.
Yeah.
And they get super weird as you get into like the Dune Messiah and all that. And he's his sister. But like that idea of like, you know, God created Arrakis to train the faithful, and that the Fremen were these like warriors and this, and like I've always really just appreciated, like with Power Athlete, my company, not only we stolen a bunch of stuff from the Fremen, but the idea of like Jeet Kune Do of strength conditioning, like so at the end of the day, I'm not stuck within dogma with strength conditioning in the company I created. Our deal was on creating efficient human movement based off of a blueprint of athleticism,
right?
So whereas, you know, people can quantify this thing, what's amazing about athleticism is it's almost next to impossible to define, even though I have a definition for it that was crafted over a lifetime, which is the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or novel task. But what's amazing about athleticism is you can see it. It's like symmetry, right?
It's so true.
Like a pretty girl walks in the room. Right? She might not be your type, but everybody's like, wow, that girl's really pretty. Same thing. I'm not a Ferrari fan, but if a front engine V12 Ferrari pulls up, I know the sound and I know what it looks like and I know the aesthetics and the colors and everything. They're amazing. Yeah. I mean, I saw a 612 Scaglinetti that was red, and like the Ferrari red is trademarked. The sound is actually a trademark decibel that they tune all the motors in a sound room.
I did not know that.
All of the cars have their own sound. And so they tune it because they were able to figure out that there's like a serotonin response with a certain tuning.
Like a primal effect?
A response when they hear that sound. So that's why I can hear a front engine V12 Ferrari, not so much with like the mid-engine cars, but the front engine. Like that sound to me, and I'm not a Ferrari fan.
Yeah.
But just like that Ferrari red.
Resonates.
It's but same thing. And so same with athleticism. You can watch the world's best athletes, whether it be, let's say, professional football. You see a guy sprint down the sideline, rotate his body, catch, and make it seamless and effortless where people kind of takes your breath away. You see it during the Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Where all of a sudden you'll watch the best athletes in the world on the biggest stage go out and have their greatest performance. And it literally takes your breath away where you go, like I saw something, I was part of something great.
Exactly.
And so what's amazing is that our body, our mind, or so like whatever it is, evolutionary, we're designed to see symmetry.
Yeah.
And like
that's how sites work, by the way.
Yeah, 100%. Like you know what's wild is those new Trigicons. They have the front one that's skinnier than one with the big one.
Yeah,
and I actually like the skinnier one because as I push it out, I can see the distance between them. So
exactly.
I know instead of just the
it's a fatter one. I like
fatter
the thinner one too.
Yeah. So it like I have it on two guns, and it's pretty funny when I bring it out and you push it out, I can actually pick it up. But then when I was reading, not everybody can pick it up as fast.
Interesting.
So certain people can't see the distance, but also like my eyesight, my ability to see things.
Yeah.
You know, from a lifetime of whatever.
Well, that's how you made your living.
Yeah,
visual.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let's do this. Okay, so you leave the NFL.
Oh, okay. So I played 5 years in Philly. And then I got into a contract dispute, went to the Chiefs.
Okay.
And then finished my contract there.
But that actually worked out well because that's where you met Tony.
Yeah, I met Tony. Well, I played with Tony in college.
No shit.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
So Tony and I were the same recruiting year at Cal. So
No
we were already
kidding.
friends. So I went there, but I got a chance to play with Willie Rofe, who is, one of the best left tackles to ever play the game. Will Shields, who's one of the best guards to ever play the game. Brian Waters, Casey Wigman, Jason Dunn.
Yeah.
Priest Holmes, Larry Johnson.
Wow.
I got a chance to play on what's generally considered the best offensive line in the history of pro football.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing for that opportunity. I was sad that I got to, in hindsight, I'm sad that I left Philly because we had done so much good work. But I felt like getting a chance to go play on the best line in pro football was
worth it.
Was nice.
Absolutely.
And then that was year 9. And then year 10, I went to the Patriots.
Nice.
And got hurt in the last preseason game. Came home and had knee surgery. And, ended up kind of shearing off a piece of bone that got stuck in the joint. So they went and they debrided, cleaned my knee out. The surgeon was a little too aggressive. And instead of like the swelling coming down, the swelling stayed in my knee for about 2 months. My knee was still swollen. I couldn't get the heat out. And there was and then I had to go. Yeah, sometimes like a surgeon causes a little too much damage. Like they can clean it out and fix some things. I think the surgeon was just too aggressive. And there was just too much swelling. Yeah. And so I ended up kind of, having the surgery, missed that season. And it took me a little bit of time. Like, I was running and training, but I couldn't get the swelling out of my knee. Teams were calling. I didn't feel comfortable going and working out for them. And then I figured like, hey, I'll just kind of
how
lay
many
low.
years was that for you?
This would have been year 11.
Oh, shit.
So then I figured I'd lay low. And just when teams would call for training camp, my problem is I got I think it was in January or February. It was in February. I got a call from this individual, little company, fitness company at the time, called me and said, hey, would you be interested in coming and helping us develop our technology on how to train athletes?
Yeah.
And so
what was the name of that company?
CrossFit. Guy named Greg Glassman. And so we went out to an event. I sat with him. He had a bunch of drinks. And then he was like, hey, you should do this thing called CrossFit football. I was like, what the fuck is CrossFit football? And he's like, it's going to be like power and strength training and like kind of like the training that you did.
Yeah.
But, kind of translated
for CrossFit modality.
Yeah, for the, within the CrossFit market.
What'd you think of Greg?
Well, I thought the name was horrible because people were going to think we were like blocking and tackling was stupid. But Greg's like, no, people get it because you played football and they still didn't get it.
Yeah.
Greg is probably one of the most charismatic speakers I've ever been around.
For sure.
Just an incredibly charismatic speaker. In a group of individuals, one-on-one, extremely insecure and just very, very like you could see all the chinks in the armor. You put him in front of a few hundred people, and that dude was like intelligent and funny and witty and Teflon one-on-one. Just very you could see all the cracks in it, and all the personality deals. And we had a really interesting relationship. So he pitches me on it. A couple of days later, I drive out to Arizona. I sit with Lauren Glassman, his wife at the time, and we kind of craft this idea. And he's like, great. When do you want to launch it? I said, I'll call you in 30 days. So I went home, created a website, put this whole thing together. 30 days later, we launched. The first day, we got 16,000 hits on the website. And then a month later, I started teaching seminars. And for the next 9 years, we taught hundreds of seminars all around the globe, from the Arctic Circle down to New Zealand and back, on every continent. And I taught a couple hundred of those myself until my wife had twins. And then that kind of pulled me out a little bit of the seminar game. But at that point, we ran and did it for a number of years. CrossFit, whether you are a lover, a hater, whatever you have to, however you feel about CrossFit, the brand, their impact will never be measured for the amount that for what it did in terms of putting barbells in people's hands.
I couldn't agree with you more, man.
I was always into lifting. Like I started lifting weights when I was 14 years old in an old powerlifter's garage.
Yep.
The fact that, in early 2004, 2005, the only training facility that I could find to Olympic lift when I was in Orange County was up at Carson at the StubHub Center for Professional Athletes.
No shit.
So with the advent of CrossFit, now all of a sudden you have like training facilities with bumpers and this, Rogue, all of these companies, in terms of putting equipment in people's hands.
Yeah.
The only other person I could even think of would be like, who was the Nautilus dude? Arthur Jones.
Yeah.
There's probably never in this world going to be somebody as impactful in terms of like getting people to understand like training and fitness and even just putting it in front of people's faces than Greg and CrossFit. Now, however you feel about him personally as an individual, that's basically like I had a personal relationship with him. So like I knew my relationship, but like I will never discount what he did in terms of like CrossFit, and people are like, oh, fuck all that. Dude. Now how you feel about him personally.
Well, think about it. Like his impact, and that's the thing that I try to give him credit for, is that he revolutionized the fitness industry.
Yeah.
And in many ways by putting barbells in people's hands. Yeah. And like him or hate him, that is a profound moment in our history as a species, if you will, because let's face it, we're not the members of our human society are probably, apex predators, but the majority have kind of lulled themselves into some
we're de-evolving
big time. No, and it's being promoted.
Yeah,
it's actually being promoted to de-evolve.
Well, not us.
Well, no,
not a power athlete. And I'll tell you this. Greg, for it's hard. Like you got to be a little bit on the spectrum or within the, I don't know, however you want to put it. Like you got to be a little far out there.
Yeah.
Like sane people don't change the world.
No.
And Greg is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. We unfortunately didn't have a great relationship because Greg's kind of interesting in that I think he the things he likes he feels threatened by. And I think we had good success and we were doing good stuff. And I actually knew that we were on the right. So one of the best things I learned from Ali G, who I am a huge Sacha Baron Cohen fan. He's so funny to me. However you feel about his political stuff, whatever. Yeah. But he's so funny, dude.
As an actor, it's hard not to.
I love him. But like the Ali G thing where he was like, if video games have taught us anything, when you encounter bad guys, you're going the right way. And so when
I like that,
there's a few people I like to quote, Ali G and Taylor Swift, right? Which Taylor Swift, the voice of this fucking, these generations, people throw stones at shiny things, which I use often, which is really what happens on the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
But that Ali G, when you encounter bad guys, like video games have taught us, when you encounter bad guys, you're going the right way.
Yeah.
So when I started having a real tumultuous relationship with Greg, I knew we were headed in the right direction.
For sure.
And it was actually Greg that suggested the name Power Athlete. So we were at a big dinner. We were negotiating a contract, and he was upset that the tagline for CrossFit football was forging powerful athletes because CrossFit was forging elite fitness. And he's like, people would rather be more powerful than elite.
It's true.
And I was like, okay. And he's like, why don't you change it to forging power athletes? And at that point, I went home and I was like, started the process. I'm like, Power Athletes in my company.
Nice.
So he suggested it, and I'm sorry I don't have a better or a good relationship with him anymore. I'm always kind of bummed on that. But at the end of the day, I don't, like my mission was different than his.
Yeah.
And and I'm also, I'm not really into like I didn't join a frat.
Yeah.
Like like the way CrossFit HQ, it was
A lot of drama.
Yeah, a lot of drama. It was just kind of toxic in that way. Whereas I thought the mission was very clear.
Yeah.
And so
Stay on the mission.
yeah, just like, hey, like here's the mission. Like
Stay on mission.
just
man.
let me just get out of the way, let me go 100 miles an hour and support me when I need it, but don't impede me. And so I think what's pretty wild is like to this day, I still use quotes that Greg told me. I mean,
absolutely.
One of the ones I use quite often is people fail at the margins of their experience.
People fail at
the margins of their experience. And so what I've spent a lifetime doing is extending my margin.
Yeah.
So if you like, I'm big on like, I mean, obviously being a classics major, I'm in this constant evolution of trying to be a Renaissance man. So I want to learn new things. I'm constantly like skill acquisition is a huge thing for me. So if somebody has a skill that I need or I want, I go and I learn it. Yeah. And what I want to do is I want to be, able to do anything. And, whether it be, like I weld and fabricate and build trucks. I mean, whether it's build motors, I mean, I can run machinery, dirt work. I mean, all the stuff we do at our ranch, I can podcast, I can write, I can, do a lot of different things. And what happens when I develop a skill set, I realize when I'm able to see when other people are more skilled than me. Mm-hmm. And then it allows me to actually be able to understand what an expert is. Yeah. So like Harry, who does our branding stuff, for example, I can do that stuff. I watch him do it and I'm like, he's way better than me. Yeah. And so it's really, I think a lot of times people don't dive into certain things because they're nervous of sucking. I have zero problems with sucking and being bad at something and admitting it because I fell in love with the process of going from I don't know shit to being an expert. And to me, like to quote my buddy Ted Ritchie, the party's on the road. Yeah. He used to always tell me, he was another incredible mentor of mine, but extremely intelligent dude, outlaw biker. But he used to tell me, he's like, remember, dude, like the party's on the road. It's about the journey, not the destination. Dude. Like all the fun stuff happens getting there. Man, and so
I love hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like I'll just give you an example. And you probably run into this at your courses when somebody comes out and maybe like they're obviously like you can spot proficiency just by how they put on their gun belt. For sure. By how they keep their gear when they put it out. For sure. Right. It's like me. Like I can walk into a gym and I can tell you how many miles you have back walking a bar out of a rack just based on how you set up, how you put the weights on, all these other stuff. 100%. Because you become this like master of observation and what you're trying to constantly do is gauge people's proficiency. Right. Like, because we went and taught seminars. So I had to walk into a room of 40 or 50 people I've never met and get them to lift heavy weights like that. Yeah. Like you got to be able to assess people and figure out who the problems are quick. Yeah. So I can walk in, I'd like look at the shoes, look at the setup, look at you pick it up quick. And it's like for you go in, you see them, you're like, man, hey. And then you probably say like, hey man, like I can tell you're a beginner, and they get instantly offended. Dude. And you're like, why are you offended that I'm saying like, I get this all the time.
So much.
You're new around here. Are you new? And then they get offended. And I'm like, you guys have somehow equated new and a beginner
to bad.
It's
so true. I fucking hate it.
Thank God. I suck. Show me how to be better.
Dude, and here's the thing. I remember as a young, I was a little bit more, and I wasn't a young frogman anymore, but when I was first tasked, like to go out and start training at other locations and then bringing back that material to the command, I can remember, okay, the command is expecting me to come back as a subject matter expert and share that knowledge with my teammates. That's a huge responsibility. And I can remember showing up to like the first class and like, okay, dude, I don't know shit. You need to fucking get me up to speed. I need to be able to go back. So whatever you need me to do, if I need to stand on my head, if I need to wear a pink tutu, if I need to fucking drink out of an eyelid, whatever the fuck I need to do to go back to my command as a subject matter expert and share this knowledge, that's your job. And I am an open, I am not going to say no to anything you tell me.
Choke me out.
Dude, exactly.
Tell me I'm shitty.
Exactly.
And then dude, you know what? Like, it's the, I'll just tell you, when we were, like, I told you we got into martial arts pretty early. Yeah. One of our favorite things to do was after, so this is fucking hilarious, but 6 a.m. Saturday morning, my dad would start banging on the windows because we had to wash all the cars. So every Saturday we washed all of our cars. Awesome. So my dad had his car, mom had his car, and we had a Suburban. So we had 3 cars to wash. 6 a.m. we'd be out there by like 6:30. He'd already be pissed at us because we weren't out there at 6. So we'd wash all the cars, had to clean all the rims, like we do, like, and we did this
detailed work
every fucking Saturday.
I love it, man.
And then if we did a good job and we were on time and we were enthusiastic, whatever, he'd take us to lunch and we go do something. If not, he'd just fucking get on your bikes and leave. Saturday morning, we'd get up and we'd go to church. And we'd have to like move pots and like all the other farming or shit around the house we had to do. And then we would watch like Kung Fu theater.
Oh, dude.
And there was one thing that was universal in the Kung Fu theater for like the themes. There was always like a student that had to humble himself before he got to enter to begin the training. And then they always like showed his like maturation process of going from like the beginner, he gets beat and he's like, and then all of a sudden you see him beat there's always,
classics,
it's
man.
the hero's journey.
Yes.
Right. And so what I'm amazed by is that like people will pay to, whether it's my seminars where we've taught a ton or show up to yours, and you're like, well, dude, okay, you made the first step, you paid, like you showed up,
you're here,
you're
man.
here. Like humble yourself. Like I think a lot of people come for validation.
Oh God, don't get me started on that one.
I know. And instead of like, so I did Craig's class.
Yeah.
Which so much fun.
And for the audience, that's Craig Douglas.
Yeah. So Craig was on our podcast with Jeff.
Yep.
And so Craig's like, hey, I'd love to have you in a course. And I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds great. So like 2 days before his course, he's like, hey, I'm having a course in 2 days. You want to come? And I'm like, I'm looking for every fucking reason that I can't, right? Because I'm like, dude, you really, this. And I'm like, okay, fuck it. I'll humble myself. It's Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday.
Yeah.
Which in my life is tough with kids and a wife and the whole thing.
Dude.
So I'm like, you know what? Like I said I would go. What do I need? He's like, you need a pistol, a mouthpiece, and a cup. That's all he told me.
Check.
I'm like, sure, I'll show up. So we show up Friday night, and he was kind of doing like his introduction in terms of like what I like to refer to as being a bouncer.
Yeah.
So like I worked as a bouncer in college, and my ability to like assess violence and especially see things happen like became very good. As Craig's going through this, I'm like, oh, we just need to make everybody a bouncer. This is all the shit about basically how to not get snuck on and this.
Yeah.
So we had a great, and then show up Saturday, and we train all day Saturday and Sunday, and like there were people there that were legitimately like they trained the entire year to use Craig's course as like to whether or not their fucking shit's all in one sock.
Exactly.
And it was a lot of fun. Like we had a blast. And I remember telling him, like, yo, man, like I've never done a course. I mean, I've shot with you, and I did yours when I broke my toe.
But it's a little different.
Yeah, super different. Like I've never done any of this stuff before. And Craig was funny. He was like, you're what would he say? He goes, you're like what was it? It was like your knowledge of violence, or he had some fun. He's like your capacity and knowledge of violence is so high that you're totally fine in everything,
dude.
But we were just fucking people up, and it was so much fun. And I just hadn't done any. But like I showed up, like I don't know, like I don't even know why I'm here. I didn't look at the course. Like everybody there was like super dialed and showed up.
Yeah.
I didn't even like. I just showed up. And I was like, dude, just fucking show me your best, show me your worst. I'm here to have a good time.
My first experience with you at the range there in California was
Rahagi's.
Yeah. It was like what really impressed me was the nature that you're describing. You were just like, teach me, show me. Like and like I didn't know what to anticipate because I've had to work with folks that have, established themselves in their own area, their lane, if you will, as the top, at the very apex, if you will. And sometimes that can mean they're somewhat closed-minded. They have limited bandwidth, and that was not the case with you. Like I was just like, dude, let's just keep adding. And I remember what ended up causing us to quit was we ran out of water. Yeah, we fucking were training all day. It was so fucking hot out there, dude. That was it. We were like, we're out of water, dude. We got plenty of bullets left, but we got to fucking get some fluids.
Well, I mean, like out in the Inland Empire, out in that area, it's like Texas hot.
Yeah, it is hot. It was hot as balls out there. Yeah. And what's so funny was like I didn't know what to expect, and what cracked me up was it wasn't you, it wasn't me, it was just the fact that we like literally were like out of water.
It was fucking hot.
It was hot. And what I really appreciated about that was that, like, and I do the same thing. Like I have to show up in class, and I've got to assess everybody. We got to figure out who are the higher risks and who are the unteachables, and who are the people that you want to invest your time and energy into. And like, dude, you hit like every one of those positive marks with like, and it was fun too, because that's the other thing that I enjoy is when a student is that open to learning, you hold nothing back. It's just like full bore, open everything up.
Yeah.
So CrossFit leads to power athlete. And that was kind of like when our paths really, you were still in CrossFit football.
Yeah, I was still in CrossFit.
Yeah,
so what's wild is, and this will never happen again on the history of the fucking planet. So CrossFit launches and they asked me to put this idea. And so mind you, I was a professional athlete and I had this like huge training like background.
Yeah.
But I had never really coached people in training. Like I had like,
I can see that.
like a lot of young guys would always come over and be like, hey, can you work with me after practice? And I was always very open. Yeah. And people would be like, why are you working with those young guys? I'm like, hey, if they can take my job, I shouldn't fucking be here. And so I've always taken this, whereas other guys get real, like I'm not going to show them anything. And I'm like, dude, I will tell you everything I've done. And if you can do it better than me, then I need to go get a new fucking job.
Or I need to get better.
Yeah. And so I had worked with those guys and I had a lot of theories about my training and what I'd done. So what was cool was we launched CrossFit Football. I started posting workouts. And then I started getting hit with all this information and people started asking me all these questions of what we were trying to do. And what it effectively allowed me to do was all of the thoughts and ideas I had on performance and training, I got to push out to the world for free. And thousands upon thousands of people did those workouts for free and gave me the information.
Gave you feedback.
And then I got to travel the world and meet the people that were doing the training and actually put them through a 2-day seminar, which is effectively a diagnostic for my training.
Yeah.
And it became really interesting where all of a sudden we would start asking, okay, how many people have followed CrossFit Football? Who follows this? And we would try to segment them and say, okay, hey, these are our people. These are those, and we would just basically like, and we would kind of segment them. We'd put everybody through and we started figuring out that the people that did, CrossFit Football power athlete training were dramatically better than the people that didn't in terms of like they were stronger, they moved better, they sprinted, they did change of direction.
Dude.
All the things that we had been pushing within the training became like, it was like the shaking of the sift and all of a sudden everything came out. And it became very clear that the people that were focused in terms of like, general kind of CrossFit fitness were extremely lacking in some things that we were asking them to do. And if you've seen now, the trajectory that CrossFit took was more towards CrossFit Football and power athlete.
Absolutely.
And now it's like big, strong athletes moving heavy poundages, and they fucking like some of these girls look like they could play middle linebacker for the Green Bay Packers, like fucking savages, and I fucking love it.
I do too.
There was one of the girls I saw compete, Del Spiegel, right? This chick.
Yes.
She reminds me of like that girl, absolute beast, like a monster, big, strong, thick, like just fucking manhandling weights. And I'm like, good. Yeah. Like that's what I want to see. I want to see big, strong athletes. I don't want to see somebody do 50 fucking air squats. Yeah. Right. I don't want to see wall balls. I want to see people handle big heavages. I want to see people get upside down and fucking do some, see big people do athletic moves. I want to see them pull big fucking snatches and deadlifts. I want to see people fucking slay big weights.
The weights that they're throwing up.
And those are CrossFit Football weights. Yeah. So what we've seen is we've seen this evolution over 10 years to something which is what we were pushing early on. Yeah. And not that I was saying that, we were early, we invented it in any way, but I think that the evolution is just like in the NFL. People want to see big, strong individuals out there just fucking murdering each other. And that's what they want to see. And that's exciting. So it is. What was bitching about it is I got a chance to write programming, push it out for free, and then have, thousands upon thousands of people pushing feedback back. And then I got to go meet the people and travel every weekend and put them through diagnostics. And then Power Athletes started around 2012, 2013. Yeah. And then we started putting out private programming on powerathletehq.com in just like a really shitty paid back-end WordPress. And what was amazing was we still taught seminars, and we started having people that were following Field Strong come to the seminars for CrossFit Football. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, because we were still putting out CrossFit Football for free, the people that were following that were like fucking murdering us, and we're actually like killing the program. So at that point, it's pretty interesting within the strength conditioning world. After you kind of like maximize what I like to call the novice effect, which is like, like once you've kind of like maximized linear progression, you've got a little training under your belt, you come like to like a fork in the road. Absolutely. And you either have to like work on, developing central nervous system efficiency and continue to like, develop that. And we had that program for Field Strong. Well, the other one is to create your larger cross-sectional size of a muscle and make people more jacked. So then we added Jack Street, which was just kind of like a straight up bodybuilding program. Yeah. And then we just started kind of adding more and more as more archetypes came up, and we started creating a catalog of training programs to really just maximize athletic performance.
So what a lot of people don't know is, it was probably like maybe a year or two after we met. I think I had gone through the divorce before I met you, but I was like in a really dark place. Yeah. And my physicality had suffered.
Your wrist was all fucked up.
Dude, I was like, I had a lot of injuries that were still plaguing me. And
you were super bitter.
I was very bitter about that because I let myself go down the tubes like that.
Yep.
And you came around. I remember going up to your place and sitting down. And that was the first time I ever heard anybody talk about the 3 axes.
Yep.
You know, the X, the Y, and the Z axis and how they all flowed together. And I was
that's
like,
the seamless and effortless
exactly.
primal patterns.
And I was like,
space.
dude, I still have those notes. I sat down there and was just writing down all sorts of shit from that little session that we had. And like shortly thereafter, you hit me up with like the first kind of like week of programming. And I remember you asked, what do you have to work with? And I'm like, I got a pull-up bar. I got like a sandbag. I got some kettlebells. It's like, fuck it. We'll make it all work.
Yeah.
And within about maybe 6 months, I was like, these tools are not going to work anymore. I need like real tools. And that's when I started to look at investing in barbells, investing in actual bumpers, and then getting a rig and getting a rack and getting all the stuff. And dude, as soon as I did, and I never looked back.
Yeah.
And I can remember like texting you early in the morning, dude, I just hit another PR. Yeah. Dude, just did this.
You fucking slayed it, man. Dude, you killed it.
But it was the programming.
Well,
it was the functional.
It was intelligent programming.
Exactly.
And, but here's the issue where people forget, like the program is just a well-played plan.
Yeah.
Right. The execution and your ability to like execute it with the highest degree of proficiency is really what this thing is. Like, I mean, the best plans poorly executed are still shitty. The shittiest plan well executed is still better than that other plan.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, you did an incredible job. And it was amazing to see not only the trajectory and to see you kind of pull yourself out of that funk. Because I mean, dude, a divorce, especially at like that point in your life, late 30s, early 40s, is so crippling for men.
Dude, it was.
Because, you've kind of like not settled in. I hate that term settled in, but like, you've raised a family, you become this person, and now all of a sudden like your kids are growing. And it's like, it's funny because my daughters are 10, my little boy's 6. And so like I always joke with my wife, like one day they're going to go to college.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's going to be us.
Yep.
And so it's this kind of joke where we kind of like talk about like what we're going to do and this and you kind of like have this marriage and you have this plan and you have this, life together. And then all of a sudden somebody pulls the e-brake. And now all of a sudden you go on a completely different thing. And as a guy and as a woman, I mean, it just becomes like, this isn't what I thought was going to happen.
No.
And unfortunately, so what's really fascinating about men versus women, women are really good about keeping friends and keeping connections.
Yeah.
Men are terrible at it.
Man.
And what happens is we end up like, as we get older, we kind of just start like not necessarily on purpose, just because we're busy and we're focused on a million things, that we don't stay in contact with our friends as much as we should.
So fucking true.
And then all of a sudden, like 10 years go by and you reach out to a buddy and like I joke that there's 2 types of friends. Like I might talk to you for 10 years, you reach out and we laugh and have a great time as if no past. Yep. And then you have other friends that are so mad, like how, I haven't spoken to you in 10 years and they're bitter. And you're like, dude, I haven't been ignoring you. I've just been living my fucking life. Like I'm doing my best to reach out, and where the fuck were you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
the ball swings both ways, man.
Yeah. And like that's like a big one in terms of this, because you raise kids and this, and it's like, so recently I went, Matt Vincent, who does Hate Brand, he hooked up a deal. They're like clothing. He's one of our buddies, but he hooked up a deal with Indian Motorcycles. Oh, and so we got I flew to San Francisco.
I saw that,
dude. And we basically showed up. Indian Motorcycles, they paid for the gas, the food, and the lodging, and we rode from San Francisco to Monterey to Cambria, then came over the top through like 163 to this, Cuyama, then into LA, and then Angeles Crest all the way through like Angeles Crest, Wrightwood, Arrowhead, and ended up in Joshua Tree in 8 days.
Damn.
So it was fucking amazing.
I saw that. Yeah.
It was like, and what was funny was I had this like moment. I remember we were like sitting on like some wall outside Cambria, and it was just like the fucking most beautiful place. Like California, people shit on California because of Gavin Newsom and all these, like this.
There is reason to shit on it.
Well, there is.
But it's also
like the, any place that Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom hang their hat. Like I'm not living there and paying taxes, right? Yeah. But going to California and having lived there and grown up, the most beautiful place on the planet, especially that ride from Monterey to Cambria. Like every moment, like it's funny. I called my wife and I'm like, if we could just transport us here and never leave this area, I could do it.
Yeah.
But it's but as we were sitting there, Matt and I kind of looked over and he's like, "What's up, dude?" I'm like, "Man, I feel super sad." And he's like, "Why?" I'm like, "I'm sad that like it took you booking like a deal with Indian Motorcycles and like basically almost not forcing me, but like, hey, the first one he was going to do was like over my son's birthday and I couldn't go.
Yeah.
And he was like, and then this one came up and I was like finding like every reason that I couldn't go.
Yeah.
And he was like, dude, I was supposed to go to another thing. I had an appointment to go see this guy, Douglas Heel, and I had this whole other thing. And Matt's like, man, I thought this was going to be easy to book. But one, finding somebody that's got a week off to ride a motorcycle that has the proficiency to ride a bike and has enough skill to be able to talk on camera is becoming increasingly more difficult.
I could see that.
So he's like, I really need your help.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck it. I'll cancel everything and I'll go.
Nice.
And so I had this like moment of melancholy where I realized that like he had to like kind of not force me, but like, pull his friend card.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that it took him booking Indian Motorcycles and this whole thing to have one of the most amazing experiences I've had in recent memory. And I had this moment. I'm like, why the fuck did it take everything for us to hear? Like, why don't we just do this shit? And he's like, because, you got a wife, you got kids, you got a bunch of like acreage, you got like a, ranch farm this. I had 2 trees fall in that big storm. So I was cutting those down. I got, we're building a 74 Chevy full convertible Blazer for Wade's Army as a giveaway truck in September.
Oh, dude.
So like I like there's always something. So I mean I got like a ton of welding, fabrication. I got to fix some rust. I mean, so like I have a shop. Like you've obviously been a power athlete, but I got a 92 by 50 building that's half weights and the other half's all welders and shops. I TIG and MIG and bend tubes and fix all this shit. And we're building building something for a giveaway truck for our cancer charity, Wade's Army. And so I got like that. I got a wife, like I like kids, dude. Like school, like there are so many things on my plate to basically pull the ripcord and go ride motorcycles for 8 days. I have an amazing wife. Don't get me wrong.
I love Katie. She's awesome.
Yeah. So like the fact that I got to go do that, but like it was this weird kind of moment of melancholy where you're like, shit, man, like this is our life that's happening. And like what's amazing is you get stuck in the rigmarole of your life and like all of a sudden you're like, you're just existing and doing what you have to every single day. And you wake up and you're like, holy shit, what happened to my life? And I think this happens to a lot of people. Things like that, where you pull the ripcord and you get to ride a motorcycle for 8 days. I made myself a promise that I would try to do something that marks time like that at least.
Absolutely, dude.
Like 4 times a year.
So like, and I don't know if it's happening in your life at this moment, but in my life, so many of my friends, teammates are dying. And, for a lot of different reasons. But, and I say this almost every time one of them dies, which is, dude, I got to do a better job of staying in touch. I got to do a better job of reaching out. Got to do a better job of this. Got to do a better job of that. And I have. I honestly have. Like, I make it a point to, like once a month, just call somebody out of the blue, catch up, chit chat. And most of the people that I do that with, they don't get butthurt that we haven't talked in forever. It's just like you were saying. We start talking, and it's like no time has passed. And it's all good. It's super healthy, super cathartic, super like, and it puts my mind right. Like I may not be able to do everything that I want to do, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to do the things that I can do.
Sure. And
that's been a fundamental change in my life. And, like, and now I'm trying to, like, I want to do all these things, like, those memories that you're trying to create and make a part of your life as you move forward are kind of like the key things. And one of them, when I want to talk about, you mentioned it, which is your charity work.
Oh yeah.
Really want to talk about that because that's important.
So I have twin girls. And so when my wife was pregnant, her best friend, one of her best friends growing up, she played soccer with, she hadn't seen in years, sees this thing basically playing out on Facebook where her son got diagnosed with something called neuroblastoma when he was about 18 months.
Oh, geez,
and man. So we're seeing this play out, and I come home and, my wife's pregnant with twins. And so she's crying hysterically on the computer. And I was like, I didn't know if I should just like, okay, pregnant. Walk away.
Back out.
And she's like, hey, come read this. And so she's like, this is Heather. She's my friend I played soccer with. And she has twins. And she had a boy and girl twin. And so Wade, who was a little boy, he got diagnosed with this deal, neuroblastoma, which is basically it's a cancer that starts in the nerve tissues in the body. And it's super, like, it's pretty rare, only a few hundred cases a year, but it's extremely deadly. It's the largest killer of kids.
I did not know
and
that,
it doesn't
man.
really get a ton of press. So I'm seeing this thing pass out, and so then he goes into remission. He's fine. And then all of a sudden, if it comes back, it's like they basically have done so much to treat it that their little bodies just can't deal with it.
Fuck, dude.
So he passes away about a few days after my daughters were born.
Oh.
So he was November 11th. My daughters were born October 10th. So 31 days later, right? And it's really sad because he leaves his twin behind, which is like, as a parent of twins, like seeing my daughters, like I just can't even fathom.
Fuck.
So a year goes by, and my wife goes, "Hey, the 1 year anniversary of Wade's passing is coming up. Is there something we can do to like bring a little notoriety, maybe raise a little money?" And I was like, "Yeah, 100%. Let's do something." Which we do. I could design a really shitty T-shirt, and we could sell them and see if people, and then we could donate the money. So my wife's like, "Great." So I fired up my computer, designed a really awful T-shirt, bought a bunch, and basically started selling them. And so we were like, "Hey, you know what? Like, we're going to call it like whatever, like Wade's Day." Which was November 11th. So like the month leading up, we started in October. So we sold like 18 grand worth of T-shirts.
Wow.
We packed them all. And then we had like a bunch of people that were like in the community that were like, had businesses that gave a shit. We were like stuffing like, we had a lady from Urban Decay who was a clothing or makeup, like give us a bunch of stuff. She was one of our clients, like packed everything in and just mailed it all out. So that's what started the first year. We raised 18 grand. Then the next year we did the same thing. We raised 50.
Holy shit.
And we were writing these checks to these different charities. And so in that next year, after we'd written them a check, I went back a couple months later and I was like, okay, oversight, where did my money go?
Yeah.
I want to know what my money was spent for. And so not a single one of the charities could give me an accurate accounting of how my money was spent. Oh, it just goes into a general fund that pays all this stuff. And I'm like, so wait a minute. I told you
salaries.
Like salaries and this and office space. And it kind of goes into this general fund. And I'm like, well, how much of that money actually got donated? And they couldn't give me an accurate number. Dude. At which point I kind of and I realized that there's certain limitations, especially when you're running a charity and whatnot. But I was like, fuck this. So we started Wade's Army, a 501c3, and we started basically raising our own money. And then from that, we've basically the families that are dealing with neuroblastoma can write us like grant requests, and we've bought people like minivans. We've helped people pay their rent. I mean, so
dude,
when the kids get struck with this, like the parents, a lot of times, like there's only a few places. There's more now, but at the time there was only a few places that treated this. So these parents were like getting in cars and driving to Cleveland and living in their cars,
Jesus,
while their kids were getting treatment or missing jobs, and they were like, "We need $2,500 to pay our rent," and I'm like, "That's it? Do you need more?" And they're like, no, so we need $2,500. Or the kid was in a wheelchair. They didn't have a car. So then they were like, can you rent us something? I'm like, how about I just buy you a minivan? So I called a local car dealer and just bought it for him.
I love it.
And I was like, dude, like the ugly nature of cancer and what's happened to your kid, like you shouldn't have to worry about all this other shit. And so then we started looking into different cancer research, because the research is really weird, like in terms of that. But I wanted more oversight in who I was funding for what research I was interested in, and things that were like more holistic. I wanted to know like, how does nutrition, how does this, like within the pillars of Power Athlete.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted, so we raised, we went from like 50 to 100, 150, 250. So we've raised, well in excess of $1 million.
It's amazing.
And basically been given that money. And trying to help people that are in the fight with neuroblastoma. A couple of years ago, I built a late 70s Chevy C10 with an LS, and we tried to auction it off at a Power Athlete Symposium.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand how to do it, so a dude ends up buying it. No, a dude ends up buying it, which was great. This year we didn't do it for COVID, but I found a 74 Chevy K5 Blazer, the full convertible. And so we've been redoing that. And what we're going to do is in September, we're going to sell $100 tickets.
Nice.
And just do a raffle on that.
That'll
I've been
be
busting
awesome.
ass to try to get that done. It's going to be pretty bitching.
All right. Well, I want to ask you one last question. So you had so many amazing mentors in your life. Yeah. So many guys that, like you said, you were blessed. You were at the right place at the right time. What's the single best piece of advice if you were to mentor somebody this day, like give back what you gave? What would be that piece of advice that you would give to somebody that you're mentoring?
I think what's really fascinating with advice is people kind of hear this stuff and kind of goes in one out the ear, one out the
Yeah,
other.
for sure.
What I've always appreciated is really excellent storytellers. Like one of my favorites was I read a historical biography on Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
And so Lincoln had an open door policy at the White House. You could walk in and talk to him anytime. He would sit at his office. People would come in, and he would interact. Can you imagine that today?
no.
They got to wind Biden up. And then he would, after work, he would close it, and then he'd go down to the local tavern, and he'd stand with his back to the fire, and he would tell stories, and he would entertain people. And it was kind of his form, and I always remember that imagery of him standing with his back to the fire. But I realized pretty early on that stories, it's the reason that the Bible's written in stories.
Yep.
These stories are the things, the heroic epics are remembered because they're stories. And so I think a lot of times whenever you see people with advice, they're always trying to give you these little tidbits. But I'll just leave you with a story. So years ago, man, this was probably 2002, 2003. My buddy Rick, if you guys are into AR-15, I'm sure they're familiar with what Starling gear and Strider knives.
Yep.
So Mick Strider is a buddy of ours, and so obviously here's my Strider that I got many years ago.
Yeah.
But Rick is Starling gear.
Yeah.
With these little beads, but he makes rings, and he's just a real proficient artist and one of the tops in the world. And Rick does a ton of work for Starling Gear in Japan, and so he was over in Japan and meets some guy at his show who was a sword maker, Japanese sword maker. So he comes back and he's telling me the story, and because he knows that I like sharp things, and I like Japanese culture, and so we're just kind of rapping because of martial arts. And he's like, "Hey man, I met these sword makers that were original, some of the original sword makers for the Japanese deal." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, they've been making swords for the
samurai swords?
The samurais for 1400 years. Their
Holy
family,
shit.
they made the cutlery for the Japanese emperor over time,
Wow.
their family." And so he was like, "These people are legit. They're going to make me a sword." And I was like, "Oh shit, that's awesome." I was like, "They make two?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he comes a couple days later. He's like, "Hey, kick me $5,000, and that'll be a deposit on this thing." I'm like, "How much is it going to cost?" He's like, "I don't think it's going to cost very much." So I give him $5,000. So he's going to Japan. And he's like, "I'll give him a deposit to get our swords made." They say it takes a year to make them. So a year goes by and we don't hear anything. And I was like, "Yo, man, what's up with the swords? It's been a year." And he's like, "I haven't heard from him." So this goes on for years.
No shit.
And so the joke becomes that Rick just robbed my $5,000 and now he's going to get my sword. So, this might have been 2000. Maybe this was 2000. Okay, maybe this was, it had to be 10 years. So it would have been 2011, 2012. I think my kids were just born.
Okay.
He calls me and he goes, "Dude, we got to go to Japan and get our swords." I'm like, "It's been a fucking decade." He goes, "Yeah, the week before I got there to give him the deposit, the king of Saudi Arabia flew over and requested 20 swords made."
Oh,
and
damn.
they've spent the last decade making his swords
Holy shit.
because they only do 2 a year.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, "But we got to go because once they finish the sword, they basically give you it's like a gun permit, and you only have 10 days to get the samurai sword out of Japan because their family is considered a national treasure. So everything that they make is a national artifact.
Yeah, yeah.
So we got 10 days to get it out." So I'm like, "All right." So I was teaching a seminar in Australia. I flew from Australia to Japan. Get off. Rick picks me up, whatever. We're in Tokyo. We go to Osaka. We get on a train. We go to Seiki. And so the family is the Kanafusi Fujiwara clan. They've been making samurai swords in Seiki, which is a little town in the mountains, since 800 AD. Right? Same location. They have a mausoleum in the back with all the sword rubbings. So we show up and we go to the sword maker and we see the way they make everything and they're traditional.
Oh my God.
And so what's amazing is I got actually pound steel, right? Which is cool. Like they were forming swords. But as we started talking with them, I asked them about the process. And so what they do is there's a river in the back and they have this netting set up and they collect the iron ore out of the river. And then when they get enough, they basically smelt it in the ground into this kind of mass.
Huh.
And then they pretty much pare it down and they start heating it. And then they pound it and then it cools and they pound it and they fold it and they do this whole process. And so the metal basically strengthens as they heat it, they pound it, they fold it, they let it cool, they quench, and they go through this process of heating the metal, folding the metal, cooling the metal. And so this happens for days on end, and they fold this thing like 10,000 times or some insane deal. But as I was asking them, like the proficiency from the blade, like where does it come from? And it's in the heating and the folding. And it has to be folded a certain amount of times. And then once it is, then they can draw it out and they can start the finishing work. But if the foundation is not set through the heating and the folding, the blade won't, do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And these guys have this like incredible process. Like there's no machines. It's all done by hand. And so it was really impactful. So then when we go into the sword ceremony, they like basically like we go into this like tea ceremony with the sword where they like bequeath it to us and we go through this whole thing. And so pretty amazing. But for me, the analogy had to do within the folding and the heating, which is what we happen within training.
Yeah.
So you think about like you go in, right? You heat it up, you fold it, you do all the training, you cool down, you regress, and you recover. It's not like they do it once every 10 days. They do it every day.
Every day.
Until the sword is ready to be molded. But without the process of the heating, the folding, and the cooling, they can't draw the sword out, and it will never be strong. It'll be too brittle.
Yeah.
And so when they do this, not only does it create the edges, but like the flexibility of the sword and the strength and all the balance, they found,
this process.
Well, it was through the process, and it was handed down from father to son for 26, 27, 28 generations.
It's crazy.
And so what happens is it's father to son. So there's a mentorship process. They apprentice in it. Their family has effectively learned this like skill in terms of how to fold the metal and how to create it in such a way that it's flexible where it doesn't break. It's strong. I mean, all of these things. And so you think about like mentorship. You can't do it alone. It's not as if they just go out and say, hey, I'm going to create a sword.
Right.
They have a mentorship process.
Right.
They apprentice into it. Right. They learn from those before them. They learn from the mistakes.
Yep.
And the way to do it. Right. There's constant work. So they fold the metal, they do everything. And then once the process gets done from those guys, it goes to the next in the different process. So there's different steps.
Right.
One person can't take you on every step.
Yep.
And there's and then once all of a sudden it's polished and done, then there's like, here it is handing it over. I mean, it to me, it was the analogy of training and really the analogy of life where, and what's amazing is like their dedication.
Oh, yeah.
And perfection within that task. So what was killer was they made 3 swords. One of the swords is in a monastery in northern Japan. I have one, and then Rick has one.
That's so
cool. What was cool was the father, the son, and the grandfather all worked on that sword, on these swords. So they're 3 generations, which they had never done in the history of their family.
No shit.
So there was this like really rare. So what was cool was we go through the ceremony. They give me this like certificate for it, and we got this bitchin' sword now. So I go to the airport to try to leave, and I like show up and they're like, what's in there? And I present this thing and the dude's hands start shaking and he drops and he gets on and like they called. And so I didn't understand the magnitude of a real samurai sword because they asked me like, where did you get this? I'm like, I don't know, Tokyo Tower. And they were like shaking their heads because the sword, the license that I had for it is for a real samurai sword signed by the Fujiwara clan. Yeah. Which is like these people have never even seen any of this stuff.
For sure.
And so they kept asking, like, why do you have this?
For sure.
And I'm like,
I bought it?
Yeah, but like you can't purchase it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's something where like, we obviously paid money, but they like bequeath it to you. So like we go through this whole thing and like it was a fucking absolute disaster. So they end up taking the sword, locking it in a case. And then I get on the plane and I'm like, oh, fuck, so like I go through this whole thing. I have to talk to like every of these Japanese diplomats in this and their hands are all shaking. Finally, they lock it in a case. They take it away and I'm like, oh, fuck. So I get off the plane in LA at LAX and I'm standing there in line, kind of like looking around. I got my backpack because I don't check luggage because I've been fucked before.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there with my backpack and I was wearing a tan backpack that Uncle Dave, one of the chiefs for NSW gave me. And I was wearing like a black jacket. My hair was probably cut real short like this. And this lady walks over to me and she goes, I am from the Japanese consulate and we got word that a real samurai sword is entering the United States and I'm here to shepherd you and help you through this process to get through customs.
What?
Right. And so I asked her and she's like, this is a really big deal. Like there's only been a handful of real samurai swords have ever entered the United States like this. Like this is a big deal and I'm here to help.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, so I'm kind of like, oh shit.
Oh boy. What did I get myself into?
So they bring out the case and I get it. And the lady's like, like standing with me and we walk up to like the, like the customs dude, like hand him my stuff and I'm holding this big thing. He like looks at me, looks back, looks at this. And he's like, and this is right around Thanksgiving. He's like, "You coming home for Thanksgiving there, soldier?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Carry on." And I walked through, and this lady's like mouth open, because she's in the line telling me, we're going to go on the back and you're going to have to do this, and we're going to go to section, but I'm going to hear and this. And all of a sudden I walk by and I can just hear her being like, "Who are you?" as I just fucking walked away. And so it's by far like my my kids and my wife are by far my most prized possessions, but that's pretty high. Pretty high on it, but it's pretty epic. And so, dude, as amazing it is to own it, the speaking with the Fujiwara clan and talking to the father and the grandfather and the son, and going through this and seeing like the little boy over there making his little his knife part. And hearing the process that they go through in terms of perfecting like the most lethal weapon to ever been created on this fucking planet, to the point where like they sharpen these things with lasers, and then they bring these guys over, and theirs is 100 times sharper than any fucking machine can ever do. Like their eye is so deal. But like the attention to detail in the process in terms of like heating, hammering, folding, cooling, and how they go back, and they know how many times a day they can do it. Yeah. They know when they heat the metal, the exact color that it needs to be to fold. Wow. They know like if the heat doesn't cool enough and how often, and like they have an amazing process for what they know takes to make the most lethal weapon to ever enter this fucking planet. Yeah. And for me, there was like this like weird moment of like clarity and just like almost out of body when as they were talking, and I'm like, this is the analogy for training and really preparing your body for for the NFL or whatever it is, professional sports or whatever, to be tip of the spear, soldier, and be able to do that. And I think, the reason that we've got such great adoption with power athlete and cross football and all that within the military, and especially NSW, is because of that kind of Jeet Kune Do approach. And, we've been fortunate to work with, a bunch of the teams at development group, and we still do, and then worked at NSW and been in contract with them for years. So, and then also we went in and we were actually in contracting to implement power athlete training systems for the 18th Airborne Corps, which would have been about 90,000 troops. But unfortunately, those of you guys from the military that are listening will know that our program went where all good programs go, to die, which is contracting. But it's like that piece of advice, like that story and that experience I went through is by far, I love it. It takes, and what's wild is the sword takes over a year to make. So like the idea of the process, that it's a long road, that like there's no way to rush it. Like there's no way to beat the reps. There's no way to, hey, if you can't cheat it. Yeah, well, you can't cheat it. Like if they can only fold the metal 4 times before it gets brittle, then they fold it 4 times. They don't do it 5. They don't do it 6. They don't do it 1. They know what it takes to get you to be that. And it's a process, and it takes time, and there's patience. They hand polish. It takes a dude hundreds of hours hand polishing this. I mean, there's no machine that they're like, hey, we can just do it faster this way.
Let's just buff that out.
Hey, just buff that out. Because that's the process. They know what it takes to make this work of art that's this, incredibly lethal weapon. And it's amazing to see, and it was amazing to be a part of, and to realize that, like, as I stood there, and they how many samurai and some of the the history, most like badass people on the fucking planet have received that sword. So you think about like Tom Cruise, the Last Samurai. Yeah. So it was their family that was making the swords for the Samurai Rebellion. So you see them making the sword at the very end. Yeah. They go, that allegedly is their family.
That is so amazing.
Yeah. So to have done that and have that experience was, it was cool to be a part of that lineage, but to also see the task at which they presented and the dedication to perfection was, I think, the best piece of advice I could give everybody is like, you can't rush the process. Yeah. You have to have somebody more knowledge than you. And unfortunately, it usually happens in person. You can't learn it on the internet. Yep. And that's so true. And you have to humble yourself. It takes a long time, and there's no way to rush the process if perfection is what you're searching for.
So like you said this probably 2 or 3 times during the podcast, but I will sum it up like how I interpret it, which is like, there's no easy roads. There's no shortcuts. It's not an overnight success story. And so it's a low trajectory towards that distant horizon. And that's what people don't realize, is that, people want to think that it's this like straight up climb, but it's this long, low trajectory before you actually get to the end state, the horizon that you're trying to get to. So Man, my brother, I can't thank you enough. This was awesome. Learned a lot about you that I didn't know.
Oh, well,
First of all, that was pretty cool.
Thanks for having me.
Well, no, it's my pleasure. Let's do this. Can you give the audience ways that they can read up on Power Athlete, Wade's Army, you yourself?
Yeah.
Fill us in.
PowerAthleteHQ.com is really where you start with Power Athlete. And you can find me on social media at John Wellbourn. I'm real easy to find. And if you're interested in Wade's Army, wadesarmy.org.
Awesome.
And super easy to get a hold of us. We have a podcast, Power Athlete Radio.
Yes.
We've been doing for 600 plus episodes. So
number one.
Yeah.
I've got a little ways to go.
Well, you know what? It's a long road.
Exactly.
And think about how many people don't, they see Joe Rogan with 1,500 episodes us, we have 600 and some, and they're like, oh, I'm going to be so late to the party. And you're like, dude.
Just enjoy the ride.
A step of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, or a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. I mean, you have to do the first one.
That's right.
And then once you do, you build upon it. It's Andy Stumpf, mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
Andy, years ago at our Power Athlete Symposium when we first started, and it was just a few people, he came and gave an incredible talk about the effect of dominoes. And so, if you put a domino up and you kind of go over, if, one domino falls, there's just a little bit of energy. And then he had an equation for if you lay out 1,000 dominoes, it's enough energy to basically knock over the Empire State Building. And I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember what it is. But he talked about the way that he passed buds was his goal was just to see the sunrise every day.
That's amazing. I mean,
everybody else was focused on when I pass buds. And he's like, I just want to see the sun come up.
Dude.
And every day was his domino. And by the time he got to the end, he built up enough momentum that it just fucking catapulted him through.
I did almost the exact same thing.
He gave this incredible talk. And, dude, I still count Andy as one of my good friends. Unfortunately, he lives in Montana and got into the cult of jiu-jitsu, so I don't get to see him as much. But still so impactful.
Yeah,
and
I love Andy, yeah.
And so, he, that talk he gave is basically resonates within all this, the energy, especially the stacking the dominoes. But like you said, man, I mean, it's a reason that I have a blog called Talk to Me, Johnny.
Yeah, I love that one too.
Which the tagline is, it's a long road.
Yep.
Which is also the theme song from, was in Rambo First Blood, when he's walking, with the shirt on, with his green jacket. It's it's a long road.
Oh my God.
And so that was the song because it's Talk to Me, Johnny, Coven Leader and Raven, Talk to Me, Johnny.
I love it.
Which is still to this day my favorite movie, which is Rambo First
Blood.
Oh, incredible book.
I love the book. All right. Well, folks, I want to thank you for tuning in for what I believe was an outstanding podcast.
Thank you.
There's going to be a lot more information that we'll post there at the end. Until then, folks, take care and stay safe. I'm Jeff, and we're out of here.